Boom. Okay. Here.
And oh, it looks like the brother here he is right here. Perfect
Hey,
timing.
what's up, man?
So I'm going to go ahead and what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring Dr. Greg up onto the stage and we're going to let him introduce himself and then we're going to get into today's topic, which is a very important topic. So, Dr. Greg, can you hear me, family?
Yeah, I can. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
No, it's such a pleasure, and I really appreciate you taking time out of your day. I know you're super busy these days, and so it's. I know you got the career and also the family, and you've got the kids and the wife, and it's on your weekend. So I'm just really grateful that you would take time out to speak to my small audience and just try to help people get some actual good information out there. There's so much fucking misinformation that's being just permeated on the on social media, and I'm trying to counter that. You know, for my doing my small part, what I can to make the world a better place and people like yourself who are actually educated in these fields and actually have the knowledge that you could give real solid information. That's what we need to be platforming as much as possible. So I'm
Oh,
just really grateful for you being here today, brother.
thank you, man. That's very, very kind of you. Very kind words. Thank you.
So do you want to just introduce yourself and tell the audience, you know, who you are, what your background is, your qualifications, you know, you let them know who is Dr. Greg.
Yeah. So, I guess I've been a research scientist for about 17 years now. So I started in molecular biology with algae biofuels, and basically went learned molecular biology through that, and then went into land plant research for a little bit, and then did some yeast genetics work, molecular biology too there, and basically been in love with changing DNA around, just changing DNA around, seeing how it changes organisms, and then making more product from that. And I kind of see microbes as a technology that we can use in order to make fuels and materials and food. And I think that that's kind of the future for humans going forward. And I really do feel like that we have to utilize these technologies. And I kind of got wrapped up in the CRISPR craze, and I was reading about 2013, 2014 about this new molecular biology tool that's going to be the coolest thing. And I got lucky enough in order to start working with it back then, and introducing it for the first time to an organism. And that kind of gave me kind of like the bug to be on groundbreaking new research and new fields. So I went back to been back to school, got my PhD, and basically in a land plant lab. He was interested in me for my algae experience, and they were using nanotechnology in order to deliver DNA and RNA elements to plants. So his hypothesis was, would this same technology be adapted for algae? So that was what my PhD was in, trying to pioneer this nanotechnology and algae interdisciplinary field, and did that for my PhD, and then got out and went back into biotech again for a little bit, and unfortunately got wrapped up in the Trump layoffs when he basically cut, because of the tariffs and the rising cost of energy in Europe. Basically, Germany pulled out 50% of its research and development funding in the United States and closed a ton of labs and stuff like that. And one of those was the lab that I worked with, or for. And and basically I've been doing kind of like full-time science communication since then. But I started back in the pandemic. I did my science communication back then when a lot of people were doing foraying into streaming and stuff like that. Took a little break because of finishing my PhD, but now I've been coming back since actually the last month. I'm at like 1 year, so doing the Dr. Greg show thing. And yeah, man, I basically debate a lot on TikTok and have people join my stream there, and then also going into the YouTube, YouTube streaming and YouTube debate world a lot more too. So I've been doing like modern day debates. So it's been fun.
That was a great introduction, and there's a lot to unpack there. I don't normally, so I haven't in the past done a lot with politics. I have been getting a lot more involved in the political sphere this last couple months, actually. I've always been involved in my local politics, but when it comes to kind of more the national and global scale, I just don't have the emotional fortitude for it. I get so frustrated, to be honest with you. I just such a lack of patience with what our leaders are doing, and I see problems on both sides, to be honest with you. I consider myself to be an independent centrist, and so I tend to shy away from the conversations. But I've been feeling like there are conversations that need to be had, and I need to start getting more involved in this, more active in this, and try to see if there's something I can do to help influence people to make better choices with their voting power and stuff like that. But because I'm still so ignorant about a lot of things, I do try to try to stay in my lane and not give out any bad information. But I do respect the people who are very well informed about politics. In fact, I really enjoyed watching. You had two videos. I didn't want to do a bunch of politics today. I want to talk science, but since it has come up, you did two really great videos where you did a tier list for candidates. That was really cool how you did that. I was really appreciative of the fact that you did both sides to let people know these are all the people. This is their strengths and weaknesses as you saw it. I thought you provided a very balanced and fair explanation of all the candidates. And for anybody who's interested in that, it was a really comprehensive breakdown from both sides. And I would definitely recommend checking out Dr. Greg's show if you want to see, just for the political side of things. Obviously, when it comes to science, so that's really in your wheelhouse.
Yeah.
And I've been describing you as a molecular biologist, so I assume that's accurate. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, like if you think about it in like football terms or something, the teams are kind of like the fields of science, and then for like microbiology. So I play for like the microbiology team, and then my position on that microbiology team is molecular biologist. So it's kind of the same thing. Molecular biology is basically just the tools that we use in order to study the cell or the different, like the genome or, different parts of what's happening. Anti-fascist frog, what's up, man? Hi, Lauren. And so, yeah, I've been doing molecular biology for 17 years. I have a PhD in microbiology. I basically do the genome and engineering and stuff on microbes. And because I definitely just feel like microbes are the future, man. I feel like 99.9% of microbes are out there. They've never been sequenced. They've never been cultured in the lab. And think about all that life out there, billions of years of evolution, new types of materials that we could use for plastics, food. But we just keep it with materials, like new ideas for. Sorry, my kids are in the background. The roads. What can roads be made out of? What can biodegradable bandages be made out of? What can we make? There's just tons of different ways. Like my shirt, the plastic in my shirt. What kind of new materials are in those genomes left to be discovered on Earth? I think on Earth, microbes is the final frontier of science research. It's absolutely fascinating. There's also fuels in there too, right? So like aromatic rings and stuff like that, and that is the basis for jet fuel, for example. So maybe we could find different ways of creating those more efficiently through these different molecular pathways that we can utilize there, and food too. So like think about different types of protein that we can make more efficiently, or microbes that can make them for protein per cell mass, that kind of thing. So they're all just they're just out there as a treasure trove in order to be found. And kind of how I see it intersecting is that, like, in order to do that groundbreaking foundational research, we have to fund that with public funds, because basically private companies do not want to spend that money on that research, because there's no technology yet. So companies and biotechnology companies, the premise of those are patents, right? So patents is a monopoly in order to make something, or a process to make something. If you don't know what that is, how are you going to patent it? So that's why for-profit companies don't spend a lot of money in lizard gut metabolism studies. Well, why wasn't that happening? But that wasn't happening 30 years ago at Eli Lilly, right? They don't do that kind of research. They let the academic studies happen in 1995s that were doing Gila monster metabolism studies, and then they find out GLP-1 agonists and all these type of like this family of like, molecular mechanisms that we could exploit and create medicines off of. 20 years later, you get, the single action GLP-1 agonist that creates this medicine. And, that's going into insulin sensitivity and that kind of stuff for diabetics. And then you find out that, oh my gosh, it has this weight loss manufacturing capability too. And then Eli Lilly says, hey, this is really cool. I want to buy that. So I think that's how that all kind of intersects. Like science is inherently political because we create knowledge based off of public funds, and then private corporations, steal that through buying it, right? Through steal that knowledge that was acquired through the public funds, and then take it, privatize it, and then sell it through the economy. That's how it's all works. So we are intricately political, and I think that one of the biggest problems is scientists not getting involved with it, not touching politics, and saying like, oh, this is a done issue. Why do I have to get involved? I just can be in the lab all day, and I don't think that that's true. I don't think that the pandemic showed that too, that we have to explain the things that we are out there doing. And we need actual scientists to do it too, not just like, I do think that there's something inherently different when you have a research scientist that's like explaining research as opposed to like a medical doctor or physician. I think that that's cool. I think that they're awesome, a integral part of society. But I do think that we need research scientists to be explaining that to the public, to make that case for those public funds.
Maybe just a quick note to the chat here. Out of town. Oops, too many types. Out of town. Yeah, so that's actually very interesting to me because, well, I'm not a scientist. I actually am an engineer, and I have 2 patents myself for my innovative hull design. You see me riding a hybrid kayak, stand-up paddleboard, towable, motorized watercraft. Of. I had a number of different options, and I ended up going with what's called a thermoform polyolefin plastic because it's 100% recyclable. And my product actually got a green rating from the EPA because of that, the recyclability of it. So plastics in and of themselves, we need to take advantage of these technologies and use them responsibly, right? I know sometimes plastic gets a bad rap, and for good reason. We need to be careful about just these throwaway plastics and stuff like that, and be responsible about how we reuse plastics. We need to be understanding the role that microplastics play in the environment, so on and so forth. But like I built my deck out of recycled plastic material, right? Using boards that weren't made of wood, decking that wasn't made of wood anymore. And it's a lifetime product. Like literally, like, cool. That product will last longer than the house. You know what I mean? It's just amazing what plastics can do when they're used responsibly. But it does take responsibility.
You might know Stephen Mayfield. Do you know who that is? He created algae-based plastics, or plant-based, basically plant oil-based plastics. The idea, he made like a surfboard, and he's making shoes. It's called Algenesis. It's like a biomaterials company. And I worked in his lab. That was where I started at the algae biofuels lab. So yeah, it's really cool.
That is amazing. Now you're talking about, I haven't heard of this, brother, and it sounds fascinating. So you're talking about something that's completely biodegradable then?
Yeah. So the problem with a lot of like biodegradable stuff right now is it never actually degrades. It just makes it smaller, so that it basically creates microplastics. So that's kind of the problem with biodegradable classically, is that it actually just breaks it down, not necessarily makes it bioavailable. So we were doing something at BASF. We are looking towards like putting like bacterial spores inside of plastics that could eat the plastic once it was like became compost, and then the spores and the bacteria would activate after a certain amount of years, and then kind of break down the spores. So yeah, it's interesting. I'll DM you the Algenesis link, but yeah, it's cool, man. Cool.
I would definitely be interested in checking that out. The thing about plastics is when they get recycled, depending on the quality of plastic that you're using, that you're starting with, you could reduce it down a number of times, until it gets to a point to where it just can't be used again. But now I'd say I'm not political, but heavily involved in outdoor activities, being an outdoorsman and an athlete and things of that nature. I'm a river guide still, right? I
Oh,
take people out
cool.
on kayak trips and stuff. And so the rivers in particular, I'm really into river conservation, freshwater conservation, the oceans. I'm an old surfer. When I was down in San Diego, you know how that is down
Oh,
there, brother.
hell yeah.
And so when I'm looking at things that I'm actively pursuing, it's actually trying to protect the environment. And while I'm not an anti-natalist, I don't know if you're familiar and how much philosophy you get into or whatever. There's a philosophy called anti-natalism. Are you familiar with that by chance?
Yeah, like not having kids.
Yeah. It's like they say that it's fundamentally unethical to have children. I
Hmm.
don't believe that's true. In fact, the philosophy in it itself is actually quite flawed, in my opinion. However, I am highly concerned about overpopulation, and I
Hmm.
think we need to find an ethical way to kind of slow things down. I think that I have a lot of strong views on that actually. So,
Okay.
um, when it comes to this things like pollution and these, a lot of stuff that's negatively impacting the environment, human caused climate change and all that stuff, I'm really proactive about trying to get involved in that kind of stuff and try to encourage people to, stop panicking about the replacement rate numbers, take this population growth seriously and how we're actually using, you mentioned energy and the impact that energy had on your career and so many other people's lives, right? As soon as one asshole president starts shooting bombs across the sea at some other asshole president, the first thing they do is they cut out the energy, and the energy crisis affects all the little people, all the domestic, situation and stuff like that. And it's so hard on people's lives. People have a difficult time. They lose jobs, they lose homes, they lose all kinds of stuff. You know what I mean? Equitability and everything else. And so this only happens because one, we can't find a way to get along, and two, there's just too many of us just fighting over what are in fact limited resources, right? So that is a conversation I actually would like to have with you another time, because I know that you said that you're kind of shifting your focus is really heavy on climate change as well, and I'd love to get a couple scientists together. I talked to Austin
Yeah.
Sims, the brother. I think you've talked to him a couple times.
Yeah.
Austin, he's really smart for how young he is too. I mean, he's really ahead of the game, and he said he'd love to get together and maybe do a show about that, because that
Yeah.
is a topic I want to start focusing on. So many people deny human-caused climate change. I can't believe how many science deniers there are in this world. We're going to be talking about
Uh,
vaccine deniers today,
yeah.
but it just blows my mind, that people are so willfully ignorant. I guess I hate, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful or throw shade. It just is. There's so much good information out there. How can people? It's almost, to me, I swear to God, brother, I feel like it's flat Earth level insanity.
100%, man. Yeah. I think yeah, I mean, I, I think that there are problems. If we hadn't like gone through the Green Revolution, for example, in the 70s, like we would definitely have, a problem with generating the food necessary in order to have this many people, on Earth. And as we increased our food productivity per square acre, we kind of just allowed and make it more capable, for more people to live on the Earth. So I think that we kind of just will naturally have kind of like a topping out point, where productivity and our food will it'll die out. Well, the productivity to capabilities, the derivative will stop at some time. But I think in terms of science denial, I think it's interesting. There all have always been like a strain uh, in America. Anti-intellectualism, has always been rampant. The Know Nothing Party, for example, it basically was it basically they were like they embraced the science conspiracy side, and they were just kind of like, yeah, we know nothing, that we're the Know Nothing Party. So it's 150 years ago. But the I do think that this latest strain, where it comes from and where it started, really is tied with social media, the internet. Russian disinformation agents, I think, were to play a lot more than people realize, I think. And it kind of makes you seem, you know, this 2015, 2016, people kind of like talked about that as a thing. And then the Mueller report came out and people kind of like didn't really look into it, but you had Republican senators verifying it. You had the Republican Party putting out Senate intelligence reports talking about it. There's 3 separate reports, 300 pages each, and you can look in there. And vaccine misinformation and disinformation is all in there. It basically is just it at the heart of it, vaccine disinformation and really most conspiracies is all about kind of empowering the individual to know more than people that have expertise, right? It's kind of like, one, their whole thing is like expertise doesn't exist, that you can kind of somehow know as much as they do. And then 2, you can actually have some power over your life and you don't have to listen to these people too. So it's, I think too many people kind of like, it is a little bit inevitable, like that we're going to have conspiracies spread on algorithmic social media platforms because it's easier to explain, the lab leak conspiracy to someone than like population genetics of coronaviruses in bat caves, for example. But, it's just, conspiracy is just kind of something that our brain likes to do. And it actually maps on to how we evolved too. So this is something that I don't think enough people talk about, where, basically our brains and how we remember information is like a mapping, like a physical mapping. The idea was that in order to kind of remember, like bush, tree, clearing, that leads us to water. So like when we saw those sequences of items, we drew the mental map in our brain that water is good. This road that I have to remember, that's a good thing. And basically what conspiracies do is they exploit that. So it's that evolutionary mechanism in our brain that conspiracies enact because they draw that line. They just draw that line. So instead of kind of like thinking about it in terms of population genetics, virology, microbiology, viruses, germ theory, that's how reality works. And the other side, their conspiracies map that like Peter Daszak to EcoHealth Alliance, to Fauci, to Wuhan Institute of Virology, to gain of function research. And that's that little road that people get, brain stuck into. And it sells, man. It sells. It's more likely to be shared. Conspiracy theories are more likely to be shared on social media. And another, I think it's like 400% more likely. And then on top of that, just the sheer amount of anti-vax, anti-science, anti-intellectualism, it's from a small amount of from actual sources. So there was some study that found out that 60 to 70% of the anti-vaccine rhetoric on the internet is from 12 sources. Just 12.
That's insane.
Yeah. So it's not that much, I don't think that, if we're talking about anti-vaccine specifically, I don't think that like science has actually been the victim here, in the fact that like, liberals and Republicans and, don't treat anti-vaccine rhetoric the same. Like Democrats are still holding strong on vaccine policy. Independents are still holding strong on vaccine policy. It's just really the Republican Party that has dropped from about 85% to about 50% on a lot of like the MMR, safety and efficacy, and that it's needed, for example. So, when you have, MAGA's like 20% of the population, the Republicans, the voting population of the Republicans in the United States population is about 20%. And then when you have those numbers going from 85 to 50, well, that pans out actually, because we were 94% MMR vaccinated before, and then now we're about 88%. So we don't need that much percentage to drop us out of herd immunity or herd, so it's more targeted than I think people realize. There's less sources of disinformation than I think people realize. and it's more empowering than I think people realize too. So it's frustrating.
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, that's actually staggering when a small minority can make so much, have such a large impact, especially going the wrong direction, the direction we don't want to be going. You know, it's interesting, brother. I was asked or invited to host a show on someone else's channel yesterday, and the topic was philosophy. I was discussing what they call presuppositional apologetics in favor of God's existence, and I
Yeah.
was basically, I picked the four most common ones, and it showed where the fallacies lie and how you can, you can counter these arguments and how weak they actually are. And afterwards, of course, I opened up the panel and I got a bunch of Christians to come up and they wanted to all debate me, which was fun, debating five people at the same time, kind of mentally exhausting. But one of the claims that they made was talking about atheism and conspiracies. And so I pulled up some statistics. I don't have them in front of me today, but I could refer people to them if they want links. Cambridge University, excuse me, because of yesterday, my voice is already going out today. It's a long show, but Cambridge University in particular, there's a number of independents that have done meta studies on these conspiracy theories. And I was not surprised to find out that religious people, particularly organized religion, are significantly more likely to believe conspiracies. But what did surprise me, because I didn't know this ahead of time before I looked at those studies yesterday, but people who identify as both religious and far right wing are like 80% more likely to believe a conspiracy theory on average, which is a huge number. You know what I mean? So whatever the correlation is between right wing or ultra right, I guess they call it MAGA, whatever that is, and what do you call organized religious people, especially orthodoxy, there's some kind of connection there with the way that their mind works, or I would have to say doesn't work, maybe, unfortunately, that links them together in that they are so susceptible to buying into conspiracies. And once they lock onto that, it's like a pit bull, man. They will not let go. No, no matter how much evidence you show these people, they cannot get out of their own dissonance. It's staggering and it's frightening because there's a lot of people in that group that hold a lot of power.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, a small minority, the only way that they can have that much of an impact is if there are people in power. They've got power over social media. They've got power over the algorithm. Mm-hmm. They've obviously got political power. We've got a president in the office right now, you know what I mean, in America. So that's one way that a small group of people can make a huge impact. And it's a really negative impact, in my opinion. I did want to get into the vaccine thing, obviously, today. I was hoping we could actually talk about mRNA vaccines because I hear a lot of people really are afraid of this mRNA technology. And I don't think that people really even understand what mRNA is or how DNA works, how it codes to proteins, the process that mRNA plays. And I'm not, like I said, all my biology classes in college, my major was fire science, and so I took things like first response, EMT, stuff like that, but that's not really relative to what we're talking about here. So I'm tapping into like my high school advanced biology coursework to try and remember, okay, how does DNA sequence and everything like that get to how does the information get to the ribosomes out in the nucleotide? And it's like, oh yeah, that's right, there's this mRNA and tRNA. And so this is what this technology is tapping into. Is that what I'm understanding here?
Yeah. Yeah. 1 second. Well, I guess so. Just on the religion thing, I do think there were more religious times in the United States, and we had higher vaccination rates during those times. So I do think that there's a correlation, but I don't know if it's causation. And I do think that conspiratorial thinking. I can. Religiosity. I think there is an overlap just because I think that there's more people that are hyper conservative that are also hyper religious, but I don't know. Like for example, the Pope is pro-vaccine. I don't know what happened in Canada during those times. When they've had the outbreak as well of measles. I don't think that religiosity changed dramatically in those times in order to make that causation. So I understand why people would want to talk about that, but I don't think that religion is causing this latest like swing into anti-intellectualism. Maybe like with the white Christian nationalist, ethno-state weirdos people, that's definitely a populist deconstruction of like authority figures. So I definitely think that that's another like Venn diagram that's happening. But I do think that it's specifically, it's weird. You would think that it'd have to be, political because of Trump and his, that type of populist mentality. But then Canada has an outbreak there, and they didn't have Trump and a conspiracy theorist president when that was happening, or a prime minister. Same thing with people blame our healthcare system in the United States. Canada has universal healthcare. So and they were and then people think about that. Think about anti-vaccine rhetoric in a country where you have universal healthcare. You're like you're causing everyone's healthcare to go up. So you would think that would be even less inkling in order to push that to weigh into those conspiracies. But public health, when you have public health care, you would think that it would be tied, but people are even worse.
Well, there is really quick. I want to touch on that because you're right. Nuance is really important, right? We don't. It's when we make sweeping statements, it can be misleading, and I don't want to do that to people, because the fact of the matter is, if you look into other studies, 92% of the people on the planet are religious, which is kind of frightening I'm a lifelong agnostic atheist. So when I'm just like, wow, 92% of the people believe in this invisible wizard or whatever, it's crazy. But I think it's specific religious groups that these studies are really talking about in particular. So when you mentioned Catholicism, the Catholic Church actually has a reputation as well known for being much more progressive than a lot of like Protestant denominations. So the Catholic Church's position on some stuff like old Earth theory and evolution, they actually accept this. They tend to take so a lot of the stories in Genesis as being metaphorical, right, or allegorical. They don't actually say, now they do have a position that say you can define it how you want. They don't force their people one way or the other as far as doctrine goes, but the church's official position is pretty liberal. So it doesn't surprise me that like when you say the Pope does support vaccines, that doesn't surprise me at all. But I think that what I'm seeing and what these studies are saying, it's probably more specific branches of religion and tied to this far right extremism, politically speaking. It's not to say that the religious belief or even the political belief is what makes them do this. It's something, the way that their mind works, the way that they organize and collect information, and what they decide to choose to reject or accept. There's this, and you're right, it's tough when you say correlation isn't necessarily causation. That's actually true, but we can't just wave away correlation either, right? Because if it was causation, then there would be a correlation inherently. So there is nuance to it. You're right about that.
Yeah. It was interesting. I was thinking about while you were talking about that, like the expertise model in religion, like, someone like a, Shiite Muslims and Catholics kind of shared this idea of the religion kind of like moving as it goes on, that it's very progressive in that way, right? You have, the Pope gets a new update that's like, hey, black people are cool now, and then black people aren't discriminated against magically, like there's the same thing with so, no, that's cool. Mormonism is the same way. It's just like, oh, this a new update came in, guys, this is it. And so, but if you think about like Sunni Muslims and Christianity, these are both religions that don't have, it's just a book, it's a very conservative in that ideology, right? It happened, it's a thing, we're not moving, it's more dogmatic, right? It's not going to change. It's the books, or the texts, and maybe our interpretations can change as that happens. So I guess you're right in the fact that I would presume a Catholic to be more progressive just in general, or a Shiite Muslim in general. And you see that with Iran, Shiite Muslims, majority. You see that with the Catholic Church and accepting science. So yeah, it's an interesting thing, but they all kind of come with, even a pastor or something like that, they have expertise exists, right? Like the pastor has expertise to let you know what it is. And none of them are trying to deconstruct church, right? Or trying to say that like pastors don't know anything, or so it's just, I was trying to think like what is it about the the hierarchical power structure of religiosity that could like coincide with kind of like a deconstruction of the pharmaceutical companies, that hierarchical power structure that exists. You know what I mean? But I get, yeah, it is interesting.
Yeah, no, you're touching on something that's really important, because one of the key components to my own ethical model. So even though I'm an agnostic atheist, I actually hold the position that morality is in fact objective, based on the fact that there are true moral facts in existence. And I could go, I have a whole argument for it. I won't run you through all that now, but the point being that fallibility is one of the primary virtues, actually. And when you're talking about dogmatism, it's the exact opposite, right? Because people claim that they have access to some truth, and that no matter what new information comes in, they can never change their position. And fallibility being a virtue, this is why I believe that science is our best method for discovering truths, because fallibility is a virtue in science, right? Everything I tell people all the time who are these anti-science conspiracy theorists, that they think that evolution is this scam or something that some scientists, some governments are pushing on the world. It's like, no. Science is an open platform. Anybody who's smart enough can go over any scientific theory they want to. And if you have the ability to debunk it, it's not like somebody's stopping you from doing so. You know what I mean? Like, science is always about going back over the information, because we get new data. And when we get new data, we should go over old ideas and make sure, hey, are our ideas holding up still? Right.
Yeah. I mean, this is my running challenge. I mean, anyone who does not think that evolution exists, like, help me patent the technology in order to create new things without evolution, and I'll write the patent with you. We can go 50-50 on the Nobel Prize. Like, we can, whatever you want. But the problem is that, conspiratorial thinking doesn't create new knowledge that you can patent. It doesn't create new technologies and new companies and new ideas. That's how you actually like test your ideas, right? Science creates science creates knowledge. That knowledge creates a patent. That patent becomes a technology and a company, and a biotechnology company. So I was in a modern day debates last week, and I was like, dude, this guy thought he had discovered, the secret way that mutations happen, that explains how humans hyper mutated from the time of Noah and like his harem of like 8 people that existed on the world, and us right now. And I'm like, let me know, like, let's, like, we can sell it to pharma, and we can sell it to all these, wherever it is, we'll patent it. And he was like, well, you can't patent, the government won't ever allow us to patent that technology. And I'm like, what? Like, you don't need any permission, in order to patent something. We can just, patent it ourselves. So, but it's just not a serious contention, right? It's not a serious way that people are actually creating new knowledge. It's always like a retrospective, you know what I mean? These conspiratorial thinking is by definition a reactionary ideology, right? Something happens and people say, I reject that. No. Conservative, right? No, I'm going to say no, that I don't recognize that. But it has to make the claim first in order to have a conspiracy about it. Like, think about all the people that were conspiratorial during the pandemic about how they're posthumously looking backwards and saying, oh, conspiracies were right the entire time, this way and this way and this way and this way. It's like, you're just, again, like going back to what we were talking about before, you're just creating that mind maze to make it right in your brain. But like, you couldn't do that even one step forward in the future. Like, how with these conspiracies, how are we going to stop measles virological evolution right now in our population? Like, how could we do that? And they don't have any new technology. They don't have any new ideas on how to stop measles. Their only idea is really to deny the existence of measles, right? That's why they have to deny germ theory. Now they have to deny that viruses even exist. They have to, and they do that because if we deny viruses exist, we don't need any vaccines. Therefore, vaccine harm via super rare adverse side effects. Now those adverse side effects, that 1 in a million chance, is actually worse off than the virus, because the virus doesn't exist in their mind. So it really ties back to it's just sad, man. A lack of expertise, a lack of nuance, and but anyway, sorry, we took a tangent. But the mRNA technology is really interesting. So basically, so vaccines kind of start out. I would say think about like 200 years ago. Think about 200 years ago when all these people were losing their lives and we didn't really understand why. People are doing experiments trying to understand, like there's worlds, that we cannot see, that people are showing through experimentation, that that there's something in the air. Is there bad air? Like what makes people sick? Like how does this actually happen? And then really about 100 years ago was this huge flip in how we understood the world, and that humans really started to take in the idea of germ theory, that there's an invisible world out there that's impacting humans that we don't understand. And they're doing things like isolating viruses, they're creating bacteria cultures, they're doing all these different things, and people are realizing like, oh my gosh, we need to combat these. Like a lot of people are dying from this microbial, invisible world. And basically people started inoculating themselves with small portions of viruses in order to save themselves. So this is the first, one of the first public health campaigns, in North America, was, George Washington inoculating his troops against smallpox. And that's one of the reasons why we won in the Revolutionary War in the United States against the British, is because we had a resistance to smallpox that was going around. And basically, what people did classically was you basically had two different ways of introducing that viral portion into your body. So you could either make the virus inert through some type of like heat or chemical, making them they still had the pieces, the crowns of the viruses that, the spikes, the spike that you see on the spike protein or something, they're still there, but they're altered a little bit, or they've changed, but it's good enough in order for it to actually teach your body how to make antibodies, right? So the antigen from the virus is presented to your body. Your body throws out a bunch of antibodies at it. Some of them stick. It learns which ones sticks, and then they start producing those. And so that's kind of like how, basically we've had live attenuated vaccines are ones that basically the virus has evolved the ability to present as the original vaccine virus, but that it doesn't kill the host. So that was a good thing. Thank you for that chat. That's great. And that was it, basically until the 90s. And then something cool happened in the 90s, really, is when molecular biology really starts as a field. So the invention of PCR, polymerase chain reaction, is really the start of molecular biology as a field, because we basically can create and stitch together DNA sequences inside of a tube. Think about how wild that is. Like, we couldn't do this before. If we wanted more DNA, we would have to just make more organism. That's just incredibly hard. You would have to put it into a bacteria or a yeast, and specifically finding out which part of the DNA in order to do that. You couldn't stitch them together. Very, very hard. But after PCR, now we do. Now we have like the actual kind of like the hammer and nails to actually create, something through DNA that's unique. And it's that is now the explosion of like, okay, well, how do we get this into bodies though? We can have specific pieces of DNA or RNA inside of bodies. And this makes it this is a really big deal, because DNA goes to RNA, goes to proteins. So if we can make specifically parts of viruses inside of organisms, we can actually create the exact copy of virus that we need. and it's less dangerous because if you have a live attenuated vaccine or a virus that has been, evolved to lose its lethality, maybe there's a mistake. And that happened actually with the polio vaccine, when some of the first batches actually gave polio to the people that got the polio vaccine. So there are cases of that actually happening. Or imagine a scenario where you're trying to heat inactivate or chemically inactivate the virus, but it changes the spike protein enough so that it's actually not as, it's actually rendering it useless. Or it takes 6 months in order to make the live attenuated vaccine, and the virus has actually evolved a completely different spike protein in that time. So that happens. So the idea was like, okay, so we could create more specific sequences. We can make it specifically right inside of organisms, but how do we deliver it? How do we deliver it to these organisms, humans, right? And this started in 1987 with basically making RNA and then putting that RNA into organisms by having like a liposome covering them. So there's actually DNA like everywhere, right? There's DNA everywhere in the environment. And so it's actually like normal for bacteria to take up environmental DNA and to kind of like run it off and that kind of stuff. But eukaryotic organisms, they don't exist that way. Eukaryotic organisms kind of like their whole premise is that we're going to do sexual selection. We're not going to take up random DNA from the environment. Okay. So if you just splash some DNA on you, like nothing's going to happen. It's not, your body's not going to take it up. So your body has mechanisms in order to stop that from happening. So the question is how do we get the DNA inside of the cells? And basically what we do is we wrap it in phospholipids, which is kind of like the outside, the membrane layer of the cell. And by wrapping it and coating it, the RNA can kind of like go through the membrane of the cell. And then once it's in there, then it acts as a piece of RNA, and the RNA gets translated into proteins in the cytoplasm, which is where it winds up. If you deliver DNA, that's actually not as good because DNA gets transcribed and into like in other places of the cell. It's actually harder to get to. You don't want to deliver DNA necessarily because it could integrate into the host genome, and that could cause like different problems. But so RNA kind of like it basically the DNA to RNA transcription pathway is modulated by promoters, and that's another gatekeeping mechanism that the cell could stop from happening. So you don't want that to happen. It's just basically halfway to where you need to go. So I try to think about it like the DNA is kind of like a library. Our mRNA is kind of like a photocopy of a book that you like. And then you take that mRNA or that photocopy of that paper, and then you go and build, your house out of it or whatever. That mRNA is the photocopy, the house that you're building from that mRNA photocopy of the blueprint. That is that's made into proteins, and that protein is your house. So that kind of thing. And then basically we knew about this, like that'd be really cool to deliver RNA to organisms, and we've been trying to do that for a really long time. The actual molecular mechanism, though, in order to kind of help this happen, took about 20 years of research to happen. This is what Kariko, Kariko, this is what she got the Nobel Prize for in medicine. After her technology was used in order to make the mRNA lipid nanoparticle vaccines that everyone uses now. And basically what she did was really cool. So if you have a piece of RNA, and that is like building blocks that your body is like, we need those. You don't like just leave a piece of RNA around, you're going to be going through, and there's, basically exonucleases, they're called. They come up and they just chomp down the RNA. They're just like a Pac-Man, like they want to take that and use those around. So the question was like, okay, so we want to deliver this. We were delivering the RNA into the cell, but like, how do we stop the exonucleases or the RNAs, which is what they're called? RNA A's is like the enzyme that acts on the first thing. So the A's is like the RNAs for the RNA. And she did something really cool. It was like, basically you had a piece of DNA or RNA at the very beginning. It's kind of like goes left to right, which is on the left hand side is like the intro or the promoter region, and then you have your part that makes the coding sequence, which is what makes the protein. And then at the end, or the terminator region, the protein has already been made. What does it do? What's the purpose of it? And that's actually a really interesting scientific question. And what Kariko found was that even though it doesn't actually mean anything in terms of making the protein, it doesn't make amino acids, the terminator region is actually really important for exonuclease activity. So basically what they do is they make it the exonuclease, the tail end, right? The terminator region of the mRNA, it basically like folds onto itself and kind of like stops exonucleases from jumping on and Pac-Manning it through. So it's this was like the decade long research and doing this, and then also doing a different type of uridine in the actual mRNA construction of it. So they use pseudo-uridine as opposed to uridine, which is a way to create like a more a piece of nucleotides that doesn't get chomped on and used. So this is the new technology that people are using, that molecular biology is using, the new delivery chassis. And like, if you were, unfortunately enough, like to have some type of genetic cancer that could be cured or changed, up until like 2015. That is the kind of like 2015 is when we started using mRNA lipid nanoparticles in order to actually deliver personalized cancer drugs to people. Hey, Amanda, how's it going? And then now, this is kind of like the new technology that we basically use for, going forward. This is, the Moderna's just got approved in order to do their new, the new flu vaccine this way. So basically that means that flu vaccines are going to be more readily changed to the best sequence that we know that's outbreaking right then and there. So it's going to be more accurate, more effective at combating the virus. Your genetic medicines that are being made are now being made with this mRNA lipid nanoparticle delivery chassis. Like David R. Liu just did this. This is what he used for the childhood leukemia case that he basically cured of this young girl who had 2 years left to live. Bone marrow transplant failed, chemotherapy failed. But with one application of this medicine, within 6 months, her cells in her body completely changed DNA, and she didn't have childhood leukemia anymore. So like, this is the future. This is the real future of molecular biology in the 21st century.
That is amazing. The whole presentation was fascinating, to be honest with you. The way that you have a skill in the way that you present this information, brother, because being able to comprehend, something complex is always going to be relative to, what I mean? How complex is it? If other people don't know what you're talking about, it's going to be complex to them. But when you're teaching people new things, when you're sharing information like this, then the ability to actually communicate the information in a way that people can digest it is a unique skill in and of itself, above and beyond possessing the information. And you definitely have an ability to communicate there. So I don't know, teaching might be your calling. I wanted to bring this up here as a visual because I think it might help people. Mm-hmm. You're an analogy of the copy machine, the library book and the copy machine. Mm-hmm. I think probably it was about as effective a way, as simple a way as you could have put that. The process, DNA transcription to mRNA, and M stands for memory, for people who don't remember their high school biology, right? Memory. Messenger. RNA. Messenger. You get a translation. What's that?
Messenger.
Yes, messenger. Sorry, I said memory. Messenger. Thank you. You get translation initiation, the tRNA, because it needs a mechanism, right, to get into the coding. Because the mRNA isn't doing the work itself; it's carrying the information. So you get the tRNA binding process that it gets the codon. It collects the amino acids. You get a peptide bond formation. Now you're building actual proteins, and then you have like this termination you're talking about, which makes sense because if you didn't terminate these RNAs, then you would have them just building up over time, right? They would just end up taking over the cell or something like that.
Where does it know where to start? Sense. Exactly. Yeah. So the amino acids is coming in, and they're finding the little different parts, the little three triplets of nucleotides together is making that codon, and then it goes off and it's like, okay, we need an alanine here. Okay, we need this methyl group. Oh, okay, this is a stop. This is stop codon. Okay, we're done. Hands off. Let it go. And a lot of diseases actually are around this one mechanism. So the stop codon, either you have, it's called a premature stop codon, where you're making something and you're like halfway through, 3D printing this cup, but then the other half, doesn't get made, and now it's bifurcated, and now it doesn't act as a cup anymore because the other half wasn't there, So that's the basis of a lot of diseases, by the way. Or that's called a premature stop codon. Or you could have a problem where you have read through, where you just basically there's only one stop codon, and it kind of goes through that, and it keeps some random amino acids kept getting globbed onto the end, and now the protein doesn't work because it doesn't fold the right way. It's just, this is all of these things. So the summary or the orders of operation is really interesting there to highlight too, because this is also why there are so many different forms of cancer, right? So cancer is basically a cell that isn't bound by these molecular biology regulatory elements that you're talking about. All those different arrows, the DNA arrow, transcription arrow, mRNA, all those arrows are all parts of the molecular process that are regulated. And basically each one of those arrows, there could be an error in the regulation of that cell. And then that's why there's hundreds and hundreds of different types of cancers. There's hundreds of different types of mutations that can give each of the cancers. So now we're exploding here in the size of the problem. And that's why we see, we're discovering new types of cancers, because it's like, oh, well, this is a new way that this is actually proliferating in the body.
It's really interesting, an analogous way of thinking about this for those visual learners out there. What he's talking about with this premature stop would be like if you hit the brakes in your car too early, the brakes got locked up, or on the opposite side of that, if the accelerator was stuck open, right? A lot of illicit street drugs work on these receptors in the brain, and they force a receptor to stay open longer than it would, and it just continuously pumps a certain particular chemical into a particular receptor, and it gives you this euphoric sensation or whatever that's becomes unnatural. It takes a natural process and turns it into an unnatural process, and you end up getting quote unquote high or inebriated or whatever. It's the body has all these amazing natural mechanisms when they're working properly, that it functions, these biochemicals. And the way that the body works is so fascinating. And the fact that now we're able to use science to actually tap into some of this stuff. And this is really interesting, because that was where I was having some confusion with the mRNA. And because I was thinking, when I heard mRNA vaccine, I was thinking, okay, so it's got to carry information to end up getting coded, right? It works with the tRNA mechanism, so on, as we talked about before. So how is the DNA process working here with this? Because it's not picking up the information from the DNA at this point, right? Because you're actually introducing it with its information intact that you want to deliver into the cell, right?
Yeah. So in order to make the mRNA vaccines, you need a DNA template, right? But the DNA to mRNA happens outside of a cell. So basically what they do is you create your plasmid, which a plasmid is basically just like, or it's a plasmid or a vector. A plasmid is just a circular piece of DNA that's, that very common in microbiology and bacteria, because that's how they kind of like antibiotic resistance genes and stuff like that. These little, bits of get held inside of their bodies, their cells, and those plasmids can replicate, self-replicate, and all that kind of stuff. And then, I forgot where I was going here. The problem. Sorry, I totally forgot. Lost my train of thought. My bad. The idea, though, in general, is that we don't get the plasmid. Plasmid can't get to us. Plasmid pieces of DNA don't integrate into our genome. We don't use that. Oh, what were you talking about? There was a. Sorry, my bad.
No, let me ask another question. It might jog. It might kickstart that one thought there. So regarding the DNA itself.
Yeah.
That is fascinating. You've got to use DNA to get information coded into the RNA, right? So now you're working with DNA. DNA it works 4 times 4 times 4, so that's a base 64 codon, right? Which gives more than enough information to get 20 amino acids that ultimately you need to build the proteins. I think if I remember correctly, 21, something like that.
Something, yeah.
So how are they controlling what information the DNA is going to give to the mRNA so that becomes the piece they want to use?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So basically, there's different codons and the real interesting question is that there are different combinations that yield the same amino acid. So they will have nucleotides together, that make a combination. But then if you change one of them, it'll actually still make the same amino acid, the sequence. So the question is why? Why would you have that built in? And the reason is because genetic diversity is actually really important. So you want genetic diversity within your population, and you want DNA to be different between the different organisms, basically. Why? Well, that's because different DNA. That's how evolution happens. The change of DNA, like over time in a population, is how evolution needs to work. And so you want basically the different nucleotide combinations making an amino acid is crucially important in having that genetic diversity. If you're required to have one set of DNA yield one set of proteins for an organism, it basically makes them more susceptible to having things like an antibiotic taking out your entire population or something like that, or a virus taking you out, that kind of thing. So yeah, DNA is completely separate in this idea, where DNA on the vaccine element, the mRNA vaccines, the DNA is like in the nucleus and kind of just doing its own thing, but then the mRNA that's delivered is kind of circumventing that whole DNA pathway and just making exactly what we want. And it also has things like it's kind of like has molecular kind of flags at the beginning to say, hey, this is important. We need to make this. This is good to make. So, but yeah, it's really interesting. Even amongst the nucleotide combinations to make a single codon. So like, let's say it's like ACC, ACG, ACT, all yields the same alanine or whatever, let's say. Organisms will actually prefer one of those codon combinations. It's called codon usage bias, and this is really cool. So basically, within that population, there is going to be more ACTs than ACCs than ACGs, and it'll be like 80% ACTs, 10% the other ones, and it's like a huge preference that it has. And like, well, why is that? And well, it's because the tRNAs actually, so the transfer RNAs, they'll have more of one than the other. And Like it's just kind of like having like imagine it's easier to build something when you have scraps of wood that match that exact same size and shape and stain that you want versus having to go to Home Depot and then cutting it yourself and then staining it yourself and then using it again. So it's like it's just easier when the body has kind of evolved in order to make specific tRNAs and specific amino acid blocks that it needs. So it's just a real, like, honestly, the wobble hypothesis and codon usage bias is like the mechanism that actually allows genetic diversity to translate into high increased fitness for organisms in a population. It's just, it really is such a cool mechanism that people don't really know that it exists, but it really is one of my favorite things to talk about in biology, because that is how we create. And we hear so much about it, like, oh, genetic diversity is good. We need a lot of different types of organisms in an environment, and like how does that actually translate into like increased fitness? And that's codon usage bias, and that's the molecular mechanism that enables that whole process. It's really fascinating.
That is fascinating. And when I think about evolution and the way that my understanding, again, I'm not a scientist, so please continue to correct me where I'm wrong, because I want to make sure people get the right information. But my understanding is that the natural processes are always going to favor the whatever mechanism draws the least amount of energy, right? So try and be as efficient as possible. So there must be an efficiency basis as to why it's duplicating or triplicating certain pieces of information that allow for the same function. There must be a conservation of energy somewhere in that part of the process, as my assumption, as opposed to maybe it takes more energy within the cell as far as how much actual energy is, because everything comes down to energy at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So, and there's more energy needed in order to make and replicate that DNA and carry that DNA load around in all the cells of whatever organism that you're talking about, right? You're spending your metabolic dollars. You're spending a lot of metabolic dollars on DNA polymerase, making pieces of DNA that, like, do you need it? Well, the question is, yes, if you are a fly. This happens a lot. For example, we can see this in fly subpopulations. So you'll have like a basically kind of like, you know, cousins of each other, flies that look exactly the same. They have like they inhabit similar niches, but then they'll be separated for whatever reason. And the one that's separated, that's living in a more strained abiotic world. So like, you know, maybe environmental pressures or salt stress or heat stress or something like that. Maybe, you know, and we see these fly populations that have like double or triple the size of genomes than their cousins. And it's like, well, why would you do that? You're already in a stressful environment. Why would you spend more resources, metabolic resources, making DNA that you could be using for other things? And the answer is because that you're spending those extra resources for sure, but that 2 to 3 times your genome size, that gives you those Lego bricks during that time when things are very stressful. Maybe there's a genome recombination that happens that creates a new type of heat shock protein that allows you to deal with the amount of reactive oxygen species or something that are being created in your body. So that's actually how the molecular mechanism of how like genetic diversity actually goes into application is that, you know, the genome recombination happens, a new piece of DNA is made. Okay, that doesn't necessarily mean anything unique for in and of itself, but once that translation happens, now it's like, okay, now it's an RNA. Okay, so an RNA is actually really cool. RNA has actually enzymatic capabilities too. RNA can actually bind to things, so that's a cool thing. So you can have RNA, you know, as long non-coding RNA or silencing RNA, or this is actually a huge part of molecular biology, and what we understand through genetics now is these little pieces of RNA that can go and bind to something and to kind of like silence the expression of that protein or something like that. So, you know, imagine we are that fly subspecies that is in the that's in the strain. We're summer heat. This is really intense. We have, we're dying. Our population is dwindling. And in our subpopulation, one of the flies within it, or it's going to be a handful of them, because across millions of different fly genomes, you're going to have a handful or tens or 100 that happen. When you're talking about 0.1% of probability, you're talking about a lot. This is why populations evolve together, not individuals. So anyway, the point is that maybe that genome recombination creates a new RNA. That RNA, for this ability, has this ability to fold on itself, and then it binds to a reactive oxygen species. A reactive oxygen species is basically something that's created in stress in your body that at a low signal is completely fine. But if you accumulate enough of them, then that causes deleterious problems within inside of the body of the organism. So maybe this RNA gives an ability to attach to a reactive oxygen species, and then now that reactive oxygen species isn't building up in our fly population anymore, and now we can survive our heat stress because we have a new heat shock capability that we have, we've adapted, kind of thing. That happens. That is how evolution happens. That genome recombination might give a new ability to attach to a new chemical that we land on. As that fly population, we go and we land on a cactus, and a cactus starts attacking us with a chemical. We have no idea what's happening. Why are people dying? Why are fly brethren dying on our cactus? And we use our molecular microscope to look into our feet, and we see that there's a chemical, an insecticide, that's seeping into our feet, and it's causing us to, it's binding to our, it's something in our insect body, and we're dying because of it. It's an insecticide. What do we do? Well, in some of those flies, you're going to have some more genetic material, and that genetic material is going to have, a mismatch, or it's going to, there's going to be a break that happens in DNA that's floating in the cell. Maybe it goes in the wrong direction, and once that goes in the wrong direction, then that allows a new protein to be made, and that protein actually creates the ability to attack that chemical for the first time. Maybe the protein used to be a heat shock protein that we used before in order to deal with the reactive oxygen species, but now, because of that new genetic element that we had in our bodies, we actually can attach to that insecticide, and that protein now can attack that insecticide, and actually our subpopulation is survives. So it's those little battles that happen. That these it might even seem deleterious at start. Why would you carry around all this DNA? It's the backpack is bigger, right? You're carrying around more DNA. It's heavier to carry around that bigger backpack. But then during those times of need, that times of stress, those genetic bottleneck effects, where it's we're going to cull 90% of the population unless this population has this. Well, that is the stuff that you find in your backpack. You whip out your backpack, and you're trying out different things, and sure enough, it happens and it works. And that's just how evolution happens. And at the population scale that we see these things evolve, and how they're selected for.
That's a key, because I hear creationists a lot of time talk about how, there's no way life could happen, just everything being so random and everything. And when we talk about mutations, I believe my understanding is that is a random process, and what it actually does mutate per se. But what's not random is what you just mentioned, is selection, environmental pressure, right? So a mutation could end up being potentially beneficial if the environment selects for it, and it ends up, becoming a strength, and that's what ends up surviving. And then more organisms adopt this, and then you get evolutionary processes, right? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, exactly. So I it's so frustrating, because the process of those DNA polymerase errors, that's not random. The fact that it does that isn't random. It's been selected for. That DNA polymerase errors give more errors in some organisms than others. So Like there are different types of DNA polymerases across the microbial world, and some of them have different error rates based off of what they need. Sometimes you don't want a high DNA polymerase error rate. Maybe you don't. Maybe we have enough of our genome, it's big enough that we don't need DNA polymerase errors. We have enough genome, genome copies so that if we actually want the DNA sequence to be pretty good, actually, we want some DNA error, but we don't want it just rampant. Or maybe we were a microbial species that needs to adapt to new environments more rapidly. So maybe we do need more of a random generator to kind of like give us the molecular toolbox when we need it to. So it can't. It's not. I hate reusing the word random, but it is true that it creates errors on purpose. So they're like evolution selects for new genetic material being thrown in the fire. It really is kind of like a fire going in, and DNA polymerase is kind of like just throwing logs on the fire. Do you need like a raging fire? Like, yeah, that's cool, but is it always the best thing to have the most raging fire that you're always having? Like, no, you don't need that. You don't need it. Sometimes like a nice smolder or something is like exactly what you need, and that's what we have. So, whether or not would you say that the size of the fire is random, or the fire is random? Like, no, it is not random that I am having a fire outside. It is very contained. It is very specific. I am using it very diligently. So to say that I'm just randomly having a fire, no, that is not correct. And so I as science communicators, I'm always trying to bridge this like gap between like, we can't say things with 100% certainty in science just because science is that way, but it's, how we use words in science and how we use words colloquially or in our culture is a lot different. So I would say that DNA polymerase enters mutations on purpose. That's why it exists. That's why it creates new DNA, but that it also has an error rate, which has also been selected for. So I don't think that like. Also, the DNA error rates that fix the DNA polymerase errors, that's not random. The wobble hypothesis that I was talking about before, that's not random. The ability for the codon usage bias, that's not random. like all these other things that they aren't random. They've been evolved for and selected for specifically. So that's my problem with that, saying that this just think about, and they do this is their molecular math, and they say like, oh well, look at the DNA polymerase error rate. Right. And then times that by the amount of DNA that's in our genomes. Are you saying that every single one of those is the result of a DNA mutation rate? It would take humans 100 billion years in order to evolve. That's how they always like couch it. And no, so the straw man arguments that they're kind of like always coming at evolutionary theory with is always half baked and slightly wrong.
Well, that's a problem. It's a combination of misunderstanding and I think nefariously misframing things, like happened in your debate against Donnie and Sam. They have been called out multiple times by multiple people for intentionally cherry picking data that the people who actually created that data themselves said, hey, look, these guys are misusing my data here. You know what I mean? And they don't care. They just continue to just keep parroting that bullshit. And they know what they're fucking doing. They absolutely know what they're doing. They've been told, they've been shown the evidence, and they don't stop. That's how I know that there is some nefarious, some maliciousness to it. Not all people, though, especially the untrained people, like your just average everyday creationists, they don't know any better, right? So it's just, and the personal incredulity, which is a real thing that we all struggle with, right? Mm-hmm. We get like, oh wow, we live in such an amazing world, an amazing universe. It is hard to not let our own incredulity get in the way, right? Yeah. But science brushes all that aside. It cuts out all the emotions. It says we want hard data, and we maintain the virtue of fallibility, right? We know that we could be wrong when new data enters the set. We got to reconsider everything. The other thing that really refutes the intentional design argument, in my opinion, is how how strong the environmental pressure, what an incredible role environmental pressure plays in the process, right? Because
Yeah.
all living organisms tend to evolve. Well, they have to evolve to the environment that they're in, and then you get a big ass asteroid that crashes into the Yucatan Peninsula. A bunch of volcanic eruptions happen. You get this what they call like a runaway effect, and all of a sudden, 70% of life on Earth just is eliminated because of environmental pressures. And then what survives produces new organisms that are adapted to the new environment. And so
Yeah.
it's a very, we've had what, six, depending on what people consider to be life on Earth, we may have had it even seven mass extinction events, right? I mean, just the oxygenation event alone wiped out like 80-90% of life on Earth when organisms started releasing oxygen into the environment as a byproduct, right? When they were splitting hydrogen and oxygen into the water. So yeah, it's this to me, like literally, like if you can't see natural processes in this, if you look at all that chaos, that's constantly regurgitating and then matching it, say, okay, we got to figure out, this is the environment, we've got to now restructure everything, and what can't survive won't survive. That's not intelligent design. That's natural processes working within the environmental pressure. And it's so obvious to me. I just can't believe that other people refuse to see it.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. It's that's why I just, when I go into these debates, I always try to get away from just like he said, she said kind of thing, and I understand, and there's like scientific refutations to all these people that are, saying these things, but I think at the end of the day, you just have to really go in hard about like, these people are not creating technology with their ideas. You know what I mean? If everything comes back to this whole creation versus evolution debate, then we've lost as science communicators, right? Because we use our technology. We understand evolution to the point where it's a technology that we can use it for directed evolution. We use it in order to create new medicines, to stop evolution that's happening at the viral level through vaccination. Like the real impetus is for these people that don't believe in these things, in order like tell us, like, if you understand evolution so much, like, tell us how we can stop it in viruses then, right? Like help us. But they don't. It's always it's always just a reactionary politic, that's always saying and falling back to some hindsight 2020 nonsense,
No, we've got 5,000 years of solid written record ever since the Sumerians came up with cuneiform writing, right back in Sumeria in the Middle East, Mesopotamia particularly, and we've got so much information as a result of the invention of writing and being able to track things so well over such long time periods. And what we have seen historically, we have mountains, literally mountains of evidence of this, is that over time, people used to think all kinds of things were credited to these gods and these spiritual religious beliefs and stuff. And what happens is that science continuously replaces an old religious belief with a new solid foundation coming from empirical evidence. It's constantly happening. Technologies evolve, we evolve technologically, and the technological evolution grows exponentially. How fast things go! I mean, I can't believe that we live in a world where everybody's carrying around basically a supercomputer and their telephone. You got your camera, you got your watch, you got your you got internet. It's insane to think that we've already come this far just from back in the day when we used to have telephones that plug into the wall and rotary dials and stuff. I mean, how fast technology grows. All that happens from science. Religion has yet to replace a single scientific theory. In thousands of years, religion has replaced exactly 0 scientific theories. It always works the other way around. And yet people continue to hold on to these religious ideas. It's like, how can you get together with all your church buddies and pray as hard as you can and patent one thing? Give me one peer-reviewed paper from prayer. Anything. You just do and cure cancer, whatever you can do. And there's nothing. It always works the other way around. You replace one religious belief after another religious belief after another religious belief consistently, and we have so much evidence of this, and people just refuse to acknowledge that it's true.
100%, man. Yeah, I think that the only thing that is, science has been wrong in the past, and I think that this is like always their big talking point. Like, are you saying that science has never been wrong? It's like, well, of course not, but like science has only replaced more science. Like it's never been that like, oh my gosh, how did we miss this? It was actually like in some, book that's been written down 3,000 years ago, and now we understand it better. It's like, no, dude, it's just science like begets more questions, begets more science, begets more knowledge, and that's the only future future looking prediction making ideology that creates knowledge I think it's the best way to understand the world. I mean, I genuinely do think if aliens came down today and they were like, what is the best example of human innovation and humanity, I would point to the scientific method. I really do. I think that science is the best thing that humans have ever created, and the technologies that we've created from science is truly remarkable. I think that obviously the aliens will have their own process that they use in order to ascertain the truth and knowledge and that kind of stuff. But for humans, with how flawed we are, and how many conspiracies that kind of run rampant in our brains, and how much we like to lie and manipulate one another, I think to actually have a scientific process that has been so good, I think it's truly remarkable, man.
Well, brother, I'm telling you right now, if there was an advanced race that was able to scan our planet before they decided if they wanted to land here and interact with us or not, they would literally roll up the windows and drive by as fast as they could. They would be like, fuck, these people are fucked, man. There's no way they're going to want to come down here. We are so regressive in so many ways, And the thing about science and the scientific method that's so cool, it's universal. Every single place in the universe that has agents, right, is going to be implementing the same scientific method. It's gonna be consistent universally, which just tells you how amazing it is and how effective it actually is. The other thing I would say, and this is one of the benefits of studying philosophy, in addition to having the hard science, is when somebody says, "Oh, well, science has been wrong before, we can't trust them." That's what's known as the Galileo fallacy. Right. And what it does is it attempts to usurp the fact that fallibility is what makes science so credible, actually. Right. It's almost like poisoning the well. Yeah, science has been wrong before. And you know who fixed it? Scientists. It wasn't religious people that prayed over it and said, oh, you guys, Darwin was a little bit wrong in a couple things about, that the white race was, so superior to the black race and stuff in his Descent of Man. But Darwin was right in so many other ways. Right. Scientists figured that out. Religious people didn't figure that out. You know what I mean? There was a couple of what do they call scams, or where one guy infamously made a fake fossil or something like that to try and get some credit in the science community. You know who figured out it was a fake fossil? Scientists did, not fucking religious people. You know what I mean? So science is correcting science. It's not the other way. It's not religious people through prayer figuring any of that bullshit out, right?
Yeah, and I think it would be so easy to people don't. I mean, I think it's religious people just really need to say that it's evolution is the way that God made the world. And just say that, and to really just say that, please. I don't have any problem with that, but yeah, exactly. Man, it's so frustrating how easy it could have been for God, who is a writer, who would say stuff like, why not just put into the stories some story about 4 sisters where 2 of them always team up or something, or maybe, which would be the nucleotides, right? And how they bind the A and T's and the C's and G's together. Some story about how, 2 brothers and only 2 of them hung out or something like that. Or the shape of DNA. Think of some helical staircase that just goes on forever. And there's a story about how they can go up and down, but there's no ending to the helix, and the shape of it. You know what I mean? There's so many different ways that they could have, through writing things down in through parable, could teach us about microbes. Why isn't there anything in there about viruses and microbes? That blows my mind. Why don't you see anything about there? They're talking about the hidden, unseen world, it's just, you would have, hundreds of millions of people not suffering between, the creation of the Bible and antibiotics, if if God had just said stuff like that, and think about that God purposely creates humans knowing that humans are going to be 50% microbe, like 50% by cell count of our bodies is microbial, but like that's not in there either, or which doesn't make any sense. It's like, and like 2% of our genome is the protein coding parts of that we see as a human, but like 8% of our genome is viral skeletons. So if God makes us in his own image, is God a virus? Because
that's such a great question right there. Does God wear glasses? How does this actually work? It's, instead of getting germ theory in the Bible and in ancient religious texts and stuff, what we get is the notion that people who actually suffer from what we know now as epileptic seizures had demon possession in them, and we should throw rocks at them and stuff like that. It's like, what are you doing right now? I do want to say really quick now. So Dr. Greg, the way I run the show normally is I try to speak with my guest for 60 to 90 minutes, and then I open up the panel for anybody to join. I want to be respectful of your time. You're not obligated to stay any longer than you want. Okay. So if you're willing to take some questions from the audience, I really appreciate you sticking around, but I don't want you to feel like, it's whatever time you have to dip out, make sure to just let me know so I can give you some closing remarks before you go, so you can have an uninterrupted time to speak.
No, thank you.
I also want to warn you ahead of time that my one rule on this channel is that basically I want people to try to be respectful. Mm-hmm. But I do encourage people to bring different ideas, right? Because I don't want to live in an echo chamber. So we probably, if I open up this stage, we're going to get some people pushing back on things we've been saying. Happens to me all the time. And I welcome the pushback because I want to be challenged. I want my ideas to be challenged because it sharpens me up, right? It makes me realize, are my arguments good? Is my information good? So I just kind of want to let you know how the format usually goes around here. Before I do, I want to highlight this just really quickly here. The source material on this is going to be like from worlddata.com. It gets a lot of the statistics here. There's some statbase.org and of course Wikipedia. I am a huge fan of sites like Wikipedia because they always include citations, right? I would encourage people to recognize Wikipedia for what it is. Consider it to be like an abstract. Do the due diligence and dig into the citations, right? Because you can't just base your understanding of all scientific theories off of an abstract. It's a summary and you need to get into the actual information, right? But it's a great place to start. According to the numbers, and there's a lot of source material here. So I'm just giving you the abstract here. Get into the source material. You can verify this for yourself. But we look at COVID-related deaths starting in 2020, right? And what we see is a significant decline by the numbers all the way now to 2026, a huge drop. Especially from 2021, right? The deadliest year driven by that Delta variant surge, right? Or variant, I should say. I'm sorry. When you look at the summary, the U.S. COVID-19 death toll has fallen by over 95% since the pandemic peak in 2021, with 2025 making the lowest year on record. This reflects the combined effects of vaccines, treatments, immunity, and the virus's adaptation to endemic circulation. So the numbers are here. For anybody who says, "Oh, vaccines don't work," they're just killing people with the quote unquote jab and all the bullshit rhetoric that I hear people say. It's like, have you looked into the actual numbers? Look in the actual numbers and then come back with some data, some hard data. So I just want to share this with people. There is data out there. Again, double check my sources. Okay. Don't just take my word for it. Don't just take their word for it. Actually look into this. You're going to get, CDC, I think, is actually a really good resource that you could look to, right? Center for Disease Control, but you could look at other resources as well. So let me go ahead and pull this off here, and we can bring it back up if anybody wants to look at it. I'm going to pin the link if anybody wants to come up, and that's, contrarians, you know how it is around here. Welcome to join the conversation. I do expect you all to treat the guest with respect. You could push back on his ideas or whatever, but we are going to treat each other with respect. That's my only rule I have here. Although Dr. Greg is more than capable of defending himself, and mom jokes are on the table if need be, right?
Yes.
Give me 1 second to pin this, and feel free to join use that link, you guys, and I'll go ahead and pin it in the YouTube side. Here's my sister right here. Here's Dr. Greg. I don't know if you were here at the beginning, but Robin is the one who actually turned me on to your channel. She's been a big supporter of yours.
Yeah, Robin. Yeah. Hi, Robin.
Hey, Greg. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Yeah, well, I watched him in that debate he had with Kent Hovind and then he come on tacos, and like I was like, oh my gosh, we have this. I love it. We have an actual scientist and somebody. Yeah,
Thank you. Yeah, it's been fun. Been a fun group, and yeah, Taco has been awesome. I really like talking to Clint. He's amazing.
Robin, did you want to ask us any specific question? I'd like people to try to keep their questions to like one, something kind of one specific question and not get too crazy with it. I'm glad to see A's philosophy pop up. He's a brother. We have a lot of disagreements, consistently, but we've always had great conversations no matter what our disagreements are. And he studies a lot regarding evolution. He's one of the people that follow my channel that I believe still actively denies evolution. So it's going to be interesting to see what his thoughts are on this. Someone's got some background noise there. Chris Moore, always good to see you. So, I'm looking forward to seeing what A's has to push back on here. Big Bad Mama is a geologist, very well informed when it comes to sciences. So, Robin, someone's got some feedback.
I think it's A. Is it A?
Oh, yep, it was you. It was you, A. Hopefully that won't continue to be persistent because
it's Big Bad Mama. It's Big Bad Mama.
Oh, is it Big Bad Mama?
Yep, it is Big Bad Mama. Okay.
Big Bad Mama got that fan going.
Okay, yeah, it might just be when you talk, you can unmute yourself, and which we should all be doing anyway. If you're not talking, please stay muted. It just helps the show run a lot smoother. The room is piling up already. I'm really excited to see everybody jumping in here. So,
Robin,
I'm
not going to keep Greg. Like I can ask Greg questions anytime. Like
I have a question.
Thank you, Greg, for all your hard work. And but I'm gonna go back to chat because you're gonna have a lot of people coming in here because we've had a lot of people like pushing back against all this. So,
well, this is the place to do it. This is this is the place to have that conversation. That's why I wanted to bring some actual experts because I'm not knowledgeable enough to really defend these positions effectively, and I want to bring people who know what they're talking about. So I'm really grateful for Dr. Greg to be here. And again, your guys' questions are welcome. So, Big Bad Mama, you were here next. Did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I'd like to get Greg's opinion, if possible, about his idea about abiogenesis, whether he believes in some sort of RNA world or amyloid world, since he knows a lot about these topics. And I'm a big fan, Dr. Greg, by the way. So I just get your take on that, if possible.
Man, I honestly, abiogenesis research is one of those ones that I feel like I'm so disconnected from. Like as a biologist, it's kind of I love living things and like seeing how the world is and that kind of thing. So it kind of gets into a biochemical pathway that I don't understand that much. So I guess I'm just not like reading it as much as someone that would be really interested in the topic. But I think that the latest one was like the QT45. I think was the smallest self-replicating RNA that they found, which is cool, kind of like another notch kind of into that RNA world hypothesis. And that's presumably, I think, where it happened. I think Bennu and the asteroid that we just found is kind of interesting, showing that there are kind of like the building blocks to a nucleotide possibly, coming outside the world, which is like a new, which is kind of like the alternative population where like the hypothesis being, sorry, my kids are going to the pool right now. So
Panspermia.
Yeah, panspermia. Yeah. So each of these worlds are kind of like seeded with the material or something. I don't know if like they're living, obviously, but maybe the material kind of gets generated or goes.
I always favored like deep sea vents at like spreading centers and ridges and black smokers and those kinds of environments.
Yeah, me too.
Creating complex organic molecules. I'm always a little wary of going out to outer space to explain things about our evolution on Earth. But I appreciate your comment there. I'll let you go.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, Mama, can I ask a quick clarifying question, because I find that to be a fascinating topic, and I really appreciate your knowledge of these areas and research in particular. Is with the vents and stuff like that, these organisms are too far below sea level to be photosynthetic at that point. So it requires chemosynthesis.
It's chemical. Yeah, it's chemical synthesis.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. That's what I thought. Okay. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you're dealing with methanes, ammonias, and different things that the volcanic gases and liquids. And you always hear Kent Hovind say, well, you guys believe that life came from a rock. And he doesn't realize that these things are volcanic gases. And perhaps rocks were used as a substrate for complex organic molecules to be able to form the earliest cell walls. I don't know, because, but it's an interesting topic for sure.
Yeah. Hovind is not a serious person.
Sorry, I had to go into my Kent Hovind rant.
No, Kent Hovind is not a serious person. Yeah, what a joke. Neither is Donnie, frankly. And I think Dr. Greg has debated both those people. I had the misfortune of that.
It's true.
Yeah.
Thanks, Zoe. Oh, thank you for being here. I really appreciate your support. It's nice to have a mix of people in the chat, you know what I mean? Especially people who can defend the positions and stuff like that I support. But I don't expect it to be an echo chamber there. So I know you guys get subjected to a lot of chaos, and I appreciate you guys trying to hold the fort down there in chat. Thank you for that, Big Bad Mama.
Cool. I'll go back to the chat now. I appreciate you guys.
Well, thank you.
Hayes, I believe you were next, brother. I'm trying to do this in the proper order here. So I'm not trying to be rude if I'm putting somebody in front of somebody else, guys. Bear with me. But I do believe it was A's next.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, thank you for having me on. I won't be able to stay for very long. Literally, I probably have about 10 minutes, which is very unfortunate because I'd like to be here for much longer. So I'll probably just ask a question or two and see if we can get some engagement that way. But I am an intelligent design proponent. I don't think there's any conflict between science and the idea of a God or creator. There is conflict between certain religious claims, no doubt. I'm not going to deny that science has overturned some of the things that Christians have believed over time, and not just Christians, but other people of other religious ideas and things like that. But as far as intelligent design, one of the biggest problems I'm seeing for evolution is, and I did want to say, sorry, excuse me, before I go into that, a lot of the greatest scientists of all time were theists. So the idea that to be a good scientist, you have to stop believing in God, or that science somehow inherently disproves the idea of God, is just simply not true. I guess maybe I'll leave it right there for now. How do you deal with the idea that so many of the greatest scientists of all time, biologists and all fields, astronomers, were themselves believers in the idea of God and thought that scientific information brought us close to the idea that God does exist? How do you respond to that, Dr. Greg?
Yeah, I think that would make sense because, basically science relies kind of on an institutional knowledge aspect. And throughout human history, the biggest institutions have been religious, over time. So it makes sense that having people that can devote their lives to, academia or whatever it is, and the art of, or the time, to devote into things that are superfluous to human life. You know what I mean? Human understanding of in these experiments aren't necessarily kind of like the in the hierarchy of needs, right? We've established a community. We are living longer where we're not, existing where every second is a battle for our lives. So kind of creating structures for societies and culture that can pass down information over time. I think that we see that we've shown that religion is actually, the reason why religion exists is through evolution, because the humans that looked after one another, shared resources amongst one another, and they were building collectively towards something. Well, that religiosity is something that can evolve through the human experience. So, and the fact that there would be people out inside those groups that would also want to further that, I think that makes sense. I don't think that going through they had to create a hypothesis that could be tested and then shown that exists independent of the religious claims. I mean, I think that the fact that they're so separated there kind of like proves the point. Again, Donnie used the thing with the gene gun, for example, which is something that I use in as a microbiologist all the time. In order to introduce DNA into organisms, I have to shoot them at a high velocity, and when they're on a plate, and they get pieces of nanoparticles that hits their body, and it shears them, and DNA goes into their bodies. But nothing about that necessitates believing in God, or the fact that he believed in God. Did he create that mechanism or that chamber because of that? I mean, maybe it could have gotten like shown to him or something in some like religious moment, but I don't know. I don't think that it's necessary, I guess.
Ace, can I have a chance to?
I was going to say, that's all I have time.
Oh, I know you said you had to
Yeah.
get out. I'd like to volley the ball back into your court, and you don't have to respond right now because I know you're in a hurry, but maybe it's something we could put a pin in, and then we could pick it up, and next time we chop it up. But my question to you and to other people who promote this idea that evolution is some kind of a conspiracy or a plan. Shouldn't be disrespectful and call it a conspiracy on your end, but we'll just call it some kind of organized plan to refute God or whatever. I would say that because we know that the majority of scientists are in fact religious, not just in the past, but even today, so the significant majority of people on the planet are religious. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, well over 92% of everybody on this planet is a religious person. So scientists obviously are going to be, majority of them, religious people. Why is it that if this evolution or theory of evolution is meant to disprove or discredit God or creation, why is it that it's promoted by the significant majority of scientists who themselves are the majority of them religious?
So let me just try to reiterate the question. So your question is, if evolution is basically a tool, a mechanism to undermine belief in God, why are so many scientists still theists? Is that kind of your question?
Yeah, why is it being promoted by these? Yeah, why is it being promoted by scientists who themselves believe in God?
Well, I mean, you have to look at it at a case-by-case basis. Like there's a couple of people out there who've written books who are theists, like Francis Collins. It's just one name that pops up in my mind as a theist who is a proponent of evolution. There's a couple of them out there, theistic evolutionists. Some of their names are escaping me. But one thing I will say is that I feel like they believe in evolution in spite of their belief in God. They try. I think that they feel like there's a need to be a good scientist. Like we have transitioned over since the time of Darwin into this era where this kind of paradigm where to be a good scientist is to accept the theory of evolution as a fact, and if you don't, you're basically considered a crank. So it could be that some of them are this sort of engaging in sort of cognitive dissonance, where they want to be scientists, they want to be quote unquote good scientists, but they don't want to be seen as pariahs within their community. So that could be part of it. Could be social pressure. One thing I will say though is that there's no question that the whole idea behind evolution is that God is unnecessary. It becomes an unnecessary element of the entire equation. So it can only serve to undermine people's faith in God. But the real question is, what is the evidence? Like, what are the facts? How people respond to that is pretty much irrelevant, in my opinion. Like, whatever people believe, it doesn't matter to me.
Okay. No, we'll get into that. I would love to continue that conversation when we have more time to get into it, because I think we're kind of conflating evolution and abiogenesis when we talk about needing God or not needing God. And I still think you can be a theist and believe in both of those things. You can believe in God and still believe in abiogenesis and evolution, that God used these as mechanisms if a person wanted to hold that. And I think that's what my assumption is, that's what a lot of theists are doing. But I don't want to overload you with stuff when you have to go. Yeah. I appreciate you being here, Ace, and supporting my channel. You've been really great, and you've actually one of the people that inspired me to start a channel, because I remember coming onto your channel a couple of times before I even had my own. And the way that you do your platform, where you open up these conversations and allow pushback and stuff in a respectful format, you do a great job. And I'll make sure to, if I didn't already do it, I'll make sure to add a link to your channel in the description of this video. Everybody, I recommend check out A's philosophy. He's open to debate, respectful debate, and pushback and stuff. And he does a great job. So thank you, Ace, for coming by here today.
Yeah. Yeah, let me just sign out, say thank you for having me, and thank you for answering my question.
And
Yeah, we'll talk
Deacon
together.
Vertiman, are you next? I think Deacon Vertiman needs to go next. It's always good to see you, brother. Thank you. Speaking of support and stuff, the closing song that I use when I shut down the show every day, Deacon Vertiman sent me that song just out of the blue. So I really appreciate him supporting my channel too. DM, you're up.
Okay, so I had 3 questions for the good doctor. The whatever we're calling it, C19 vaxes, boosters. The first one I got was the one that you had to take 2, and I remember it got me sick like the first time and the second time. But I'm guessing the boosters don't do that. I guess I'm a little bit worried that they might. I don't know. Do they make you sick, or is it just like that initial first one made you sick, and why did it make you sick? I guess would be, and then so that's question 1. I'll do the other ones.
Yeah. So basically, when your body gets exposed to viral antigens, it creates a response. So your body basically recognizes this thing as an intruder and goes through the whole, the whole backdrop of, all right, well, we need to do, these steps now in order to fight off this intruder. And your body doesn't necessarily know it's a real viral intruder or a vaccine. So it basically, it gives it and goes through the motions of making you feel sick. So it'll make you have a temperature. It'll make you feel a little wheezy, but you're not actually sick. You don't actually have a viral infection. You're not actually diseased. So I think that we have to separate out adverse side effects and expected events that'll happen because of vaccination, and your body feeling a little wheezy and sick is actually one of the expected events. It's not one of the rare adverse side effects that we weren't expecting to actually happen. And most people, the reason why you get sick is because your body hasn't recognized that antigen yet, right? It doesn't have a response. So I always think when I get a vaccine and my body feels a little bit weird, and I always think wow, this is how my body reacted with just a small amount of this antigen. Now imagine if I had actually had a real infection and my body was actually reacting to something that was way larger than just a small vaccine dose. Like an actual viral infection is going to have much, much larger viral loads, and you're going to be out for the count for a lot longer. So that's what's happening.
Okay, that makes sense, because I was like, I don't want to get sick again, but me,
So what a vaccine is you're taking either a deadened or a mutated antigen and you're putting it into your body so that your immune system is made up of cells called leukocytes, and specifically you're training up a category of those leukocytes called lymphocytes. And lymphocytes, they're your adaptive immunity. They don't do anything to protect you until they experience a certain antigen. And then your body, using them, learns to create antibodies that attack that antigen. So there's always a risk that whatever vaccine, whatever thing you prompt your immune system with might end up actually making you sick. But it's a pretty small risk.
Yeah, and it's much less than what the actual thing would be. So,
Exactly.
Okay. Now I don't know if it's called the memory cell or something else that
Yep.
learns the various different types of viruses or whatever. Is there a maximum amount of information that it could hold, or would your body just make more of those if it needed it?
Theoretically, yeah, but your body is actually exposed to more different types of antigens in every day. So basically, your body is getting exposed to, like a new baby is exposed to thousands of different types of antigens just when it takes up soil or rock and puts it in its mouth. So there is a lot, but it's actually and it's because of all the different types of antigens that your body already recognizes in the outer world. The amount of antigen that is presented to your body through vaccination is actually extremely small, and it's actually been getting lower over time. One of the things that creates, and one of the reasons why we have those things like they're called adjuvants, which are like the aluminum and all that kind of stuff that's in a vaccine. And people go like, why would we need aluminum in the vaccine? Is because basically the aluminum acts as kind of as like a cup. So and what happens is that as the little particle comes out of the little aluminum cup, it goes over a little bit at a time. So it allows your body to react to a small amount, and then a little bit sloughs off, and then it reacts to a little bit of amount. So that's actually the reason why the total antigen amount, the amount of viruses that we're exposing people to, the total amount is actually getting smaller, and it's because of a huge leaps forward in technology like adjuvants that basically allow our body to react more efficiently to the bits of the viral piece that we introduce it to.
Interesting.
Yeah, you can think of it kind of like an IV drip, and getting exposed to a smaller amount of the virus or whatever the antigen is allows your body to spend the week or two that it needs to start producing antibodies without any severe risk. That's one of the biggest problems with not getting vaccinated, is a vaccinated person starts producing antiviral product that same day or maybe in like 2 days max. If you haven't been vaccinated and that viral product enters your body, it takes 1 to 2 weeks for your body to adapt and start actually fighting the inversion. Well, that's what makes vaccines such an incredible tool.
Okay, and then the last question was kind of a sillier one. If you'd seen the anime Cells at Work, and if you have, what you think of it, and if not, then you need to watch that. But yeah,
The anime cells? What do you mean? I'm sorry.
it's called Cell. It's an anime. It's called Cells at Work.
Yeah, it's like anthropomorphized versions of the cells in your body.
Yeah.
Like
okay.
there's a blood cell walking around delivering oxygen to different organs. I've seen clips of it. It looks interesting.
Yeah, a couple different doctors online had reacted to some of the episodes, so I thought that would be something, maybe if you're
interesting.
want to waste some time on that, you can maybe do that for a fun video or something.
Nice. And, I haven't. I like it though.
It was that or ask about the cootie shot, and I thought, the Cells at Work is more important than asking about that silly thing. So,
this is cool. Yeah, the main characters are red blood cells, white blood cells. Thank you. Yeah, killer T cells, macrophages, platelets. Cool. Yeah, I'll have to check this out. That's that is cool.
Yeah, and then the darker one is I forget what it's called.
Code Black.
Code Black, thank you. Yeah. So, anyways, all right, thanks.
All right, yeah, thank you for those great questions, Deconverted Man, because some of those questions are questions that I've heard several people ask and comments made over the last few years regarding vaccines, and especially getting sick and stuff when you receive vaccines and stuff. So I really appreciate you bringing that to the table. I think Chris Moore was actually technically next, and I'm sorry, Chris Moore, I didn't mean to skip over you there. I know DM said that he was in a hurry, and so I apologize. I appreciate your patience. Thank you.
No worries. As for me, you don't need to, I don't really have any questions or anything. I am basically I'm a son of a pharmacist. So not saying that I know everything. Also, I've been to a children's hospital due to the fact that I in and out. Due to the fact that I have cerebral palsy. So yeah, that's all kind of fun. It's the fun times. Anyway, but what I want to say is that I want to give the basically historical context a little bit, although Robin would be better at me than this because I'm Canadian also. Yeah. So, but it basically comes down to why the religious, I would say wings of the evangelical movement and so on and so forth that are more conservative. It kind of basically comes down to a court in the 40s and 50s, I think. and it just kind of come snowballed into that they basically just kind of jumped onto issues by issues that kind of goes down throughout the list, from anti-science all the way to civil rights for women and even children. So yeah, and it basically just kind of goes down to some of it is politically motivated for just kind of control, and the other is basically uh, theology becoming a house of cards if one is taken away and stuff like that. But that's all I had to comment on that. In If you want, have the two questions
Can
about
I
what.
respond to that real quick, Chris, before you continue?
Okay.
Yeah. So theists, religious believers will say things like, God gave me an immune system, and so I don't need vaccines because God gave me an immune system, and they'll say things like vaccines are satanic. So that's one way vaccines can be used to galvanize religious people around a cause. And then also, we use vaccines to keep society safer in general, which means people are compelled to take vaccines. So if you want to point at government tyranny, uh, anything people are compelled to do, you can convince them that's tyrannical. And especially if you can convince them that vaccines don't protect health, they don't save lives, they don't make society more stable. If you can convince them that vaccines are actually reprogramming their DNA and it's in injecting microchips into their body, it's all about generating outrage, and vaccines are just an unfortunate victim of the agenda of the political groups. They're just a useful scapegoat for these groups, and they don't actually care that screaming about vaccines causes more of their voters to die, to get sick and die, because they have more than enough support. They can afford to lose a few million voters by giving them bad advice. And yeah, so
However, there is the the two cases of history of, well, at least for black people on one hand, is the Tuskegee experiments.
yeah,
That's like one of the dark sides of science, where basically they either tried to using as cannon fodder or just experiments just for shits and giggles. And then there's also the Kingdom of Denmark tried to do sterilization uh,
yeah,
shenanigans with
yeah. There's a lot of
the
that.
with people of Green from the anyhow Inuit people of Greenland. So yeah, so that's the other part. Um,
Yeah,
anyhow,
that's something anti-vaccine crusaders do. They'll take something real and they'll twist it, they'll pervert it. So like anti-vaccine hysteria itself is based on reasonable things. You're injecting something into my body. What are you putting into me? It takes reasonable concerns and it perverts them. It amps them up to this level of global skepticism that borders on paranoia.
look, you're
Yeah.
preaching to the choir, Austin. To be quite honest, I don't really mind.
Fair enough.
I don't like. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. Okay, so
No, I
like,
figured.
and I'm not an anti-science either. Actually, I'm an anti-theist. But anyway, um, on the border, on what's concerning about Canada, it's just basically is that the, well, I like to say fringe, but the conservative like right wings that are into conspiracies are basically kind of delegated to the fringes, mostly in politics, because one of the things is that around 62 to 65% of people have a post secondary education on some level, and also during the Trudeau years, basically um, we had monetary relief from that, and also it's just that the guardrails in political society is more not tight, but it's just like very, very, very like eh, sorry, sorry, I like kind of have to explain this like probably like for like more than 40 minutes, and also I'm not exactly an expert on how um, government politics goes on that, but sorry. But what basically happened is that we kind of got the aftershock of the January 6 people that basically almost kind of came over in February for the trucker convoy, and that was basically just like a grievance upon grievances, and one of them was basically the vaccinations, anti-vaxxers. So, yeah. Anyhow, so yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
So,
I do think in a way that vaccines are kind of a victim of their own success.
yeah.
Prior to the 1900s, infant mortality hovered around 50%. Half of all babies would die before reaching the age of 2, and the mean age of death was in the 40s. Now the mean life expectancy is almost twice as high. Infant mortality has precipitously dropped by around 40%. That's partially thanks to things like sanitation and nutrition, but it's also largely thanks to vaccines. There's some infections that can be aerosolized and they go airborne, and no amount of sanitation will protect you from them. So only your B and T lymphocytes and a trained immune system can protect you from those diseases.
Mhm.
So
Well, now what we need to do is we need to figure out how to ethically get all the stupid people to stop breeding. One thing I do want to do here is I got a question before we go to Set Scales, who's next here. I want to address a question from the chat for Dr. Greg. He says, Dr. Greg, question: do all vaccines give the person the quote unquote virus?
Well, I mean, so prior to the mRNA vaccines, yes, there would be some type of inactivated or chemically inactivated or temperature inactivated or evolves to not make it lethal part of the virus. But now with the mRNA technology, we can just put in a little spike protein, so it's a part of the virus that your body sees, recognizes as a part of the virus and trains in order to defeat. So it really is kind of like it's a very specific part of it. And the nice thing about it, the mRNA technology, is that you don't have any of you basically have the exact same thing that you want, the exact sequence that you want, and only that one thing. So it allows us to make a bunch of very, very specific antibodies for that specific antigen. And because basically when you get a viral infection, when you look at the coronavirus image that everyone's seen, right, those little spikes are the spike protein. But then there's also like that other like sphere looking like thing, right? And that's like, it's called the capsid. So you would actually create capsid antigens as well, antibodies to fight the capsid proteins, right? Because those capsid proteins are going to be antigens that your body recognizes that wants to fight. The problem is that those type of capsid antigens aren't going to be as specific as the spike protein. So it's actually better in order to have those very specific spike protein antibodies. But technically, you do get more different types of antigen exposure when you do get a viral infection. And this is what people actually talk about, saying that like, oh my gosh, you actually get better protection from a viral infection, which is false, because one, you're getting, antigen exposure to things that aren't as specific as you need it to be, and you're risking your life in order to get that vaccine or that antigen exposure. So it's just a good way of illustrating that, like, this is why vaccines, not giving you the virus is so much beneficial to science, or to you through science.
No, I appreciate you answering that. And a couple people were in the chat who aren't familiar with Austin. So I just want to let you guys know why I actually specifically invited Austin to participate with, of course, with Dr. Greg's permission in the panel, because as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I think some of you may not have been here, but every single video that I do, in the description, I have a section that I put out for my favorite science communicators. And right now I've got 2 names exclusively on that list. I'm happy to add more if people can make recommendations to me, and I can vet them. But 2 sources that I have vetted and I support vehemently are both Dr. Greg and Austin from Scientific Origins. So I appreciate Austin taking time out of his day to come here and supplement the show with any information he wants to add to it. So he's not over talking Greg or taking any thunder away from Dr. Greg. They actually both work together to promote science and to communicate good scientific theory. And that's why I have so much respect and appreciation for the content that they both make. So just to kind of clear up where Austin kind of came in out of the blue there, so people understand what's going on. And,
I can't possibly steal Dr. Greg's thunder, because Dr. Greg's entire life is thunder. Okay, so
I do have a question though.
Well, let's let before we get into it. I'm sorry. I thought you asked your question. That's my fault. I thought you got it first.
It's more. It was more commentary to add context to the whole conversation, what I've just did. But I do have a question. Do you think that basically Western society should basically, due to the scarcity, not scarcity, but the fact that antibiotics are not are basically getting super resistance, and we're just kind of creating the endless cycle of super virus and stuff like that. I only know that it's basically on Russian technology, phages, or anyhow, it's just like another method towards antibiotics that is basically specifically attuned to your body and your needs on the specific individual, I think. And I only know the last parts of the word, which is phages, but sorry. Anyway.
Yeah, bacterial antibiotic resistance, the fact that they're evolving that is a real concern. It's kind of a slow-moving disaster. I think we probably should prescribe antibiotics more sparingly, but I do think science is working on solutions for that, and I'll let Greg go on more about that, because he knows more about that than I do.
Yeah, we're researching different ways. It was actually just this week, Stanford came out with a new virus that was made by AI. They had 300 that they tried to synthesize and try to make work, but it was actually a bacteriophage. So it was a virus that's made inside a bacteria and then infects other bacteria from there. So they synthesized 300 of them, and then they got 6 to actually work. And the idea is that these phages, bacteriophages specifically, can actually work on trying to attack bacterias in different ways. So what is an antibiotic? So an antibiotic is basically anything that that interferes with the inner workings of a bacteria. So antibiotic, biotic, bacteria, antibacteria. And some of these work really simply. So ampicillin, for example, it actually interferes with the cell wall synthesis pathway. So basically, it's a chemical that just binds to maybe a promoter or a protein, or interferes with that pathway, and then the cell wall can't establish. and therefore those cells are susceptible, and then they die. The bacteria that they die because they've gotten the ampicillin exposure. So the idea is that maybe we can attack those molecular mechanisms of a bacteria in a new way that they don't know how to defend. So basically creating new types of viruses that can attack specific types of bacteria that we could basically kind of like, evolve a new type of molecular biology tool in order to kind of get new types of antibiotics. So it is very rare. There has been, a couple of years ago, there was like the first antibiotic that's been discovered in the last like 20 or 30, like 20 years. It was pretty wild. But again, this is another thing, 99.9% of 99.9% of microbes that exist in the world have never been cultured and never been sequenced in the world. So, a huge amount of antibiotics exist in those microbes. And that is something that's how we kind of understand the world in the molecular biology world. That's all out there, basically as biotechnology or a scientist, what we do is we basically steal stuff that's happened in nature that's evolved over billions of years, change it just a little bit, and then redeploy it very specifically. And that's how we change things from basic knowledge to a technology, and then that application of that technology is a medicine. So there's lots of information in there. There's lots of information that's out there in the world that we have yet to discover.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that it's a quote unquote new field for basically Western society and East. Although I'm not saying Eastern, but I'm specifically pointing as to Russia. Basically, has a more handle on that field. And well, not in politics, but anyways. But,
I don't think so.
yeah.
I think that we are just as, we are more advanced than Russia on this stuff for sure. 100%.
Okay.
Chris, thank you for that. No, thank you.
We'll
for your
see
thoughts.
how long that stays true with the Trump administration just gutting the crap out of all science research.
Oh yeah.
True.
Oh, absolutely. The cutting of funding is insane.
Yeah.
And putting people like RFK in charge of the health department is like, what the hell is going on here? Chris, thank you for your thoughtful questions and for your commentary. I appreciate you as always. Set Scales, you are such a patient person and very kind and respectful to wait so long to be heard. And I have to give you your props because despite our differences in a lot of things about how we look at the world, I have found you to be consistent in the fact that you actually carry yourself with respect and mutual respect for other people, whereas a lot of people talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. So credit to you, brother. You're up on stage now. What do you have your question for Dr. Greg or for Austin?
Yeah, hello, and thanks for the kind words. I just wanted to read this. It's about 3 paragraphs by Manly P. Hall, written in 1923, called The Crime of Vaccination. And he says, how much longer will people have to pay to have smallpox is the problem confronting a large number of people. They send their children to the public school and are forced to allow a pedigreed concept to pump smallpox into them under the refined heading of vaccination. It has been proven conclusively that a great train of ills in body and in spirit follow after vaccination. Many vaccinated people have succumbed to smallpox, while many exposed to it have not taken it, although unvaccinated. The karmic debt for vaccination is twofold. First, to our bodies, which we deliberately defile with smallpox serum and the vaccine. Secondly, to the animal who goes through untold suffering and is itself given smallpox, in order that from the ulcers the drops of vaccine may be extracted and pumped into us. The occultist is fighting tooth and nail to abolish vaccination and supplants it with good common sense. Smallpox is primarily a filth disease, and if people would live right, bathe right, and eat right, they would not get it. For the healthy body is perfectly capable of taking care of its germs. We look forward with great hopes to the day when we will remove from the fair name of our race the blemish, mental and physical, the swollen glands, tonsil trouble, the nervousness and debility, the rashes and outbreaks, not a small percentage of which can be traced to vaccine, which kills the best in us in order to save the rest. So, exploring your guys' thoughts on manly.
So, do you have anything
Before
more
we get to the
recent than over
scientists,
a century ago?
yeah, before we get to the scientists, and I want to hear what both scientists, and also
Well-
referring to you as a scientist here, educated, but I just want to, just for point of reference, so people know who we're talking about here. Maybe I should share this. So Manly P. Hall, yeah, you see on the screen. Okay, so he was not a scientist, right? He actually was not educated in the field of any empirical sciences. He was a philosopher, a promoter of mysticism, astrology, anthropology, archaeology, and astronomy. So I would say that this guy is not qualified to, in any sense whatsoever, to determine whether or not something is scientifically ethical or ethical. Efficacious, I should say, or ethical. I mean, he sounds like every other religious quack that I've ever heard write about something like this, in my opinion. So I'll let the scientists respond.
Well, let me just say that he is not examining this from a scientific perspective. He's just basically pointing out the common sense point. How are the vaccines better than natural, clean living? Something that I have not seen demonstrated in the century since.
Well, I mean,
Well,
because viruses exist.
for one thing, smallpox isn't around anymore. Advantage vaccines. So that alone kind of destroys your whole argument. The fact that wild smallpox cases are virtually non-existent now because of vaccination.
They're not. They're dead. The smallpox is actually the only thing on Earth that's been completely eradicated from Earth. So I mean, we're talking about smallpox, which killed in the 1900s alone 300 to 500 million people. So I mean,
And was that not largely a result of the industrialization of crowded cities and living in dirty environments and forced to work multiple hours a day in unclean conditions?
I mean, that's probably definitely getting people in smaller, close places with low air ventilation definitely didn't help. But it definitely, it still exists. The virus still exists. It's out there. Our bodies, isn't capable of sustaining and fighting off every single infection because every single person that's ever died as a human had an immune system. So therefore immune systems aren't in and of itself enough in order to keep you from dying. So it's very important that, we save people from vaccine preventable illness. It's that simple. Even if you yourself are healthy, imagine a future where you have, cancer, where you're having to take an immunosuppressant in order to have, some type of, cancer therapy or something that's happening. And now you're immune compromised so that going out in the city, now you're exposing yourself to, or would you, really be going to Coachella or, the soccer game where you're going to expose yourself to measles or communicable diseases like smallpox where, would you really be safe and feel free in order to do that in your life? Like, no, you'd live in fear. Our entire society, slowed down and, because of one pandemic. That was one virus, guys. Imagine if the 17 different viruses that we vaccinate for, all of those were out in community spread constantly. And every month was like, oh, guess what? Hep B is back, or watch out for, all these different things that are being, exposed to at the, your local Walmart and your, would the companies want you to be vaccinated? Like if a certain amount of people were being exposed and dying as a direct result of like local super spreader events at like NFL NFL games, do you think that the NFL would step in at some point and be like, hey, guys, we should have people vaccinated so that they aren't just like super spreader events, that our NFL games people can actually safely go to? Like we have an innate desire as humans in order to be social, and not spreading communicable diseases is a huge part of that.
Greg was actually exactly right. The last natural case of smallpox was recorded in 1977, and it was declared eradicated in 1980. And this is just a great example of what happens when humans stop arguing and start vaccinating. It didn't disappear because of better soap. It disappeared because the virus ran out of naive hosts to infect.
Well, better soap misses the point of what I'm trying to draw attention to. These crowded environments in general that bring people together in unclean conditions is what makes the diseases prominent in the first place. And this was
No,
also
that's
what we
not true.
saw when the first cities developed. Yes, when people crowded into cities in Mesopotamia, they were actually more sick than when they were out in the wild.
But they're for sure like
So,
they aren't like, so viruses spread more easily in cities. Diseases aren't created because of overpopulation in and of itself. So this is the difference. Like, you know, terrain theory and this kind of ideology, this anti-germ theory, line of thinking is basically that, you know, there are no diseases actually. It's just that people are lying and people are doing bad, immoral things. So their body is reacting to that. And therefore, you're just a good person, and then you never get sick. So that's kind of like, it really is anti-vaccine rhetoric, and like the Maha stuff is actually, it's basically like Christianity healthcare, where if you're just a good person, you don't have to worry about viruses because viruses don't exist.
well, it's not necessarily about being a good person, but being a healthful person who uses discernment in how they use their body in the world.
Well, what's helpful for who? That's my point, is that a lot of these guys like Cohen and all the Cowell and all these guys that are that purport this stuff, I mean, they're sick. They have like a mental problem, in my opinion, because they're literally going to people that have cancers and they're telling them, don't seek out oncology and medicines because you're actually sick because you're not eating well. It has nothing to do with the cancer. There is no cancer. You're just you're a bad person, and that's just wrong, man. That's unethical. That's wrong. That's taking advantage of someone when they are in their worst moments and trying to make money off of them.
Sick, if you're already sick or old and already on pills, you know, I'm not telling you to stop. You know, I'm not saying anyone to stop doing what's keeping you alive. But I'm saying that if we look to children and let's say that they grow up in healthier and cleaner environments where they're active and eating right, they're going to be a lot less likely to be sick, regardless of if they have vaccines or not.
Yeah, but nobody's arguing against that. Nobody is arguing like for, but the problem is that vaccines allow, and specifically vaccines allow about 5 million people a year in order to survive. We're talking about people that are too young in order to get vaccinated, or too old where their immune system is more compromised. And I don't feel like there's any type of world that is, gives you a liberated and free society when there is an expiration date on your forehead, knowing full well that like grandpa has to die for the economy, and like your life is expendable, and we're just going to throw you into the wood chipper once you're 62. Like we have to
again, I'm not saying to discount the medicine if it's keeping people alive, but I'm advocating and saying that if we lived healthier lives, there would be less of a need for medicine and vaccines in the first place.
No.
Let's talk about another example. Let's talk about measles. So measles is one of the most contagious viruses known to man. It has a transmission rate of 12 to 18. One sick person infects up to 18 others. Measles gives you immune amnesia, where the virus kills your memory B and T cells, and other diseases are more likely to get to you. So getting measles makes you more likely to die of something else over the next couple of years. Before 1963, measles killed over 2 million people every year. And then sanitation efforts reduced the death rate significantly, but cases still remained high. Once the vaccination was introduced, cases went down, the death rate went down, everything went down. And now when we see vaccine uptake plummet, it's the first thing to come back because it's so communicable. We are seeing measles popping back up. Canada has lost its measles free status. You know, I don't know if America even had a measles free status, but it's probably likely to lose it too. And this is what happens when people stop caring about the facts and stop vaccinating their kids. It's the first disease to come roaring back. And it's a disease that, you know, sanitation can help, but it can't ultimately protect you because it can go airborne. And at that point, the only thing that can protect you is a trained immune system.
And sorry, Scales, but I really have to.
Well, hold on. Before you go on, Chris Moore, let's let Crystal Shaman go.
Yeah, I do want to let Shaman go next. Thank you for recognizing that, Set Scales. And I also want to just point out one thing here is that we've got a goalpost shift that's happening. So literally a paper was cited where some philosopher mythicist was talking about how unhealthy and inefficacious vaccines were. And I think what the argument that Set Scales is actually trying to make is something that I would actually potentially agree with, because I am concerned about overpopulation. I cannot support quackery, though. The quackery of saying that vaccines don't work and that smallpox should be introduced to everybody naturally and let this natural immunity, the science has literally refuted that. The two scientists on the panel did a great job of explaining that.
Yeah,
but
30% of people who get infected with smallpox die.
When it
30%.
when it comes to the actual like overpopulation issue, the overcrowding issue, that I can agree with you, brother. Absolutely. That is one of my biggest concerns. The more people we have on this planet, the more we have to condense them together, which is why I'm a proponent of, you know, smaller population in an ethical way, finding an ethical way to convince people, hey, look, we don't need to be popping out 5, 6, 7 kids, especially in the poorest countries, which are the countries that are most likely to be doing this kind of thing. But that would be my follow-up on that. Crystal, you have been so patient. I really appreciate you waiting here, sister. By the way, it's so nice to have you stop by today. Did you have a question for Dr. Greg or for Austin or anybody, whatever?
Thank you for having me, OE. Well, I have some just things I'd like to say. First of all, I do have a question for you, OE. Are you only going to have this side of this subject as being pro-vax, or will there be another side offered on a different live?
Well, I'm willing to engage in a conversation with anybody on any topic as long as they can be respectful. So this is really an opportunity for anybody to bring their objections. Am I going to host a show specifically with people who reject the vaccine? I don't think I will be doing that because I promote what I consider to be solid science. However, I welcome people's pushback. So when I have a scientist on the panel, I welcome people to come and actually engage with the scientists that I bring. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. Thank you for answering that.
You know what that sounds like to me, Crystal? It sounds like asking, well, are you only going to have a live stream about biological reproduction, or are you also going to balance it out with the live stream about the stork theory? You know, it's we're not treating these things as equal. One is science and one is a conspiracy theory.
This is why I avoid coming on panels sometimes, because things I say are turned into something else, and I'm interrupted when I'm speaking. To go on with what I was going to say, I have been on a medical Discord where it's mostly all medical people. Well, ever since the pandemic started. So I have seen a lot of documented medical information and data on many areas of the vaccine, which I don't think it's really a vaccine to me, plus people who got COVID or SARS-CoV-2, which I'm one of them. I never took any COVID vaccines, and I will not ever. And now I have alpha galactosidase, so I would never take a vaccine anyway. But that just cinches it down for me. But you know, there have been people, and it is documented, who have been harmed from that. So I've seen the medical evidence. This is not a conspiracy. It's Kevin McCairn. I don't know if you know who he is. He's a neuroscientist. And actually, he's developed a therapy that helps people to get the spike protein from taking the jabs that they took out of their body. And plus, people who got COVID or SARS-CoV-2, they also have a spike protein problem as well. So this is actually being used in a hospital in Japan. So there is another side to this, not just one side. And that's all I came.
Information.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
Yep.
You can.
Let's not interrupt her. Let's let her get her piece out. Then we'll respond. And I appreciate, Crystal. I appreciate you bringing this to the table, because this is a platform where I do want people to bring different ideas and pushback. But we'll address the idea, though, because it's a claim that you're making, and I'm not trying to be harsh when I say this, right? But you're making an affirmative claim of X, Y, and Z, and I want to give the doctors and the scientists there, Austin and stuff, a fair chance to respond. But we won't cut you off. We'll let you make your argument.
Okay. I am speaking from what I've seen and known from literally 5 years. So, no, I am not a doctor or a scientist, but I lived this myself, having that illness. So I literally had to bring myself back from death. But, someone made the comment that even Jesus would take the boosters. Well, I beg to differ. I don't think Jesus would have taken any needles in his body whatsoever, this Jesus figure, if he existed. But that's just my opinion. But I just want to share the fact that there is there's always another side to everything. It's not always clear cut. There always is some other side to it. Nothing is perfect. Nothing is perfect in this planet. It never will be.
I mean, but
Right,
all sides aren't
go ahead,
always
Greg.
equal, right? I mean, like, I'm sure, like, imagine there's another person that, let's take the extreme example. Someone that doesn't think that I should be alive today. That's someone that my life should be ended. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm sure that there's someone out there in the world that believes that, because I'm showing up on their algorithm feed, and they would love nothing more than to end my life. So do we, like, let's platform that guy. Let's give that guy like a ton of views and standpoints, and let's feel like what he is saying, and let's debate that. Like, no, of course not, right? Like, we're not going to hold open the debate idea that this person should just be able to murder another person. Like, that just doesn't exist, right? And now you think that that's really abstract, and that's like, oh my gosh, like, well, of course not. That shouldn't be someone that is allowed. But okay, but now let's say that my life, it's not just me. Now it's me, that I exist because I was born with a genetic abnormality where I don't have an immune system. Now the debate on whether or not people should be vaccinated or not directly makes it so that the attack on public health and the increase of contagious diseases in public spaces directly threatens my life and directly threatens my ability to live. So now, like, should we debate on whether or not immune compromised people should be able to live in our society? Like, I don't think so. Like, hell no. Like, just because a family member or something has cancer and they're dealing with that, now someone else should have the ability to decide for my family member that they should be able to live. Like, no, that doesn't seem right with me. So, like, in public health, we always side with the public and that collective versus the individual. And the individual, their burden is going to be getting things like vaccinations, adhering to public health restrictions. And if you don't, then I think that there should be some type of, restriction on you. Like just like how, I'm sure that there are people that feel a certain way about stopping for red lights. They hate them. They probably hate red lights, and they think that, well, it's my right to not, I want to live and I want to just floor to the floor, and, gas pedal the entire way. I don't want to use brakes. And
Can I respond? Because I think that's a serious straw man of what Crystal Shaman's actually saying. She's saying that there are two sides to the story, meaning that you as a scientist, it's impossible for you to know the full picture of what's going on. An example of this is no one's really in control of technology, and vaccines are just the development of technology. An example of that is side effects that they do not want to happen in the medicine. But they're really just effects. They call them side effects because they're not the targeted effect that they want. Scientists are not in full control over the things they make.
we do. That's what the studies are for, and we find that they are safe. They're incredibly safe and effective. And unfortunately, algorithms push ideas to people that they see and that's confirmed, thousands of times in headlines, and that just aren't true. Like, there hasn't been mass death because of vaccines. There just hasn't been. Like, the whole idea that all these people are going to die in mass after 6 months after the mRNA vaccines, that was all fake. Or a year or 2 years or 3 years or 4 years or 5 years or 6 years. And I'm sure they're all talking about there's going to be mass death at 10 years once these things go up. But there just isn't.
That wasn't even my claim, though. My claim was that there are side effects with these vaccines that the scientists do not intend.
Let's
not
talk
true.
about side effects. I would love to talk about side effects, and I would like to explain why I don't give a single flung poo about the anecdotes that Crystal's appealing to, because statistics prove her wrong. So let's take two groups, two true, simple, random samples of 10 million. One's completely vaccinated, the other isn't vaccinated at all. In the unvaccinated group, they all get it. Measles is so communicable that it's going to spread through all 10 million of the unvaccinated group. Only 3 or 4 in the vaccinated group are going to get the disease. Of the 10 million unvaccinated, 9,800,000 of them get a fever or rash. 800,000 get severe diarrhea, which is one of the things that will kill the most of them. 700,000 will get a severe infection in their ear that could result in permanent hearing loss. 600,000 will get pneumonia, the deadliest side effect of the disease. That alone will kill 12,000 of them. Up to 10,000 will get encephalitis, swelling of the brain. 2,500 will get SSPE, a condition where the illness lingers in the brain and slowly kills the host over a few years. It's freaking horrible to watch. So add it all up, about 2.5 million, mostly children, will suffer serious side effects. 20,000 of them will die, but it doesn't stop there, because the kids who do survive will be left with a severely damaged immune system that will need significant time to regenerate. Sometimes it takes as much as a year or two. Hope they don't get any pathogens during that period, because if they do, they're probably, to use a medical term, completely fucked. That's why the number of people who will actually die is much higher than 20,000. They don't die from the measles, they die from the infection that comes in afterwards while they're vulnerable and it ravages them. Even if they don't die, they'll be miserable for at least 2 weeks. Now the other group, the 10 million who are all vaccinated, like you say, vaccines have side effects, so it's only fair to look at that. About 10% of them will get a mild fever, 5% will get a mild rash. And these are actually results of the vaccine working. It's your immune system responding to the inversion and beating the crap out of it and learning to make the antibodies. About 0.001% will get a more serious allergic reaction requiring medical treatment. About 10 will get some kind of genitalia inflammation, and that only happens in males. So around 120 out of 10 million will get some kind of side effect from the vaccine, none of which are lethal. So 120 versus 2.5 million, 20,000 of which are deaths. Which numbers are better? And this is why people vaccinate and think it's silly not to do it. This is why science is going to recommend you vaccinate even despite all the anecdotes and all the fear mongering out there. So hopefully that gives you some context.
My question is this.
Well, hold on, Chris Moore was next. Let's keep things rotating in order. I know he was here before, but let's keep everybody going in order here. Crystal, thank you for your question, and you're right. I don't know. I've got another screen open, so I can't see. Did she leave? Well, she might be back in chat, but I do think Crystal did bring up one point that is very valid, and we need to consider, because she's right. There are two sides to every story, right? So we need to acknowledge that, and that's what we're actually here to do, not just today, but that is what science does. Science doesn't just look at one avenue and say, oh, look, we've got it all figured out now. Science considers all elements. It's about science. The scientific method is the best method that we have for finding the truest solutions that we can find to things, because it is a hypothesis that's uses observation, it uses experimentation, it makes predictions, and it looks at all of that before it comes out with theories. And we don't just haphazardly go through this process. It's very systematic, and it's also open format, as I mentioned before. So if people can refute the science, they're welcome to do so. So I think that while I agree with what the sister said, there are two sides to every story. Science uses more than just two sides to every story. The story that science promotes is the most well-evidenced story that we have thus far. And we should consider other sides to the story. That's true. So I want to just keep everything into proper context. So go ahead. I think it was.
I would just say real quick that I don't necessarily agree that there's two sides to every story. Some stories only have one side. Some stories have three or more sides. I don't think there's actually two sides to the vaccine story. I think there's science and a conspiracy theory. I don't consider a conspiracy theory a side, really. But yeah.
The conspiracy theory is the side of the public who feels like they're being lied to by the authorities. Now, why do they feel like they're being lied to?
But where's the accountability measure for all the naturopaths that are lying too? Like, why can't I take their license away in order to give out like rosemary tinctures at 800% profit margins, or sell ivermectin to people that when they don't need it, and, causing people to lose their life? Like, where's the accountability for that?
Well, it just comes down to the reason that there's no accountability for the authorities. It's because people want to delegate their responsibility to take accountability for themselves and others to other people to do it for them.
There's tons of accountability for science.
There's going to be problems.
No, scientist is held account is hyper. The amount of accountability measures that science has to prove is hyper accountability versus zero accountability.
Every vaccine has to go through round after round of safety and efficacy testing. Wellness products don't require any of that. They can just throw shit in a bottle and sell it to you.
Yep.
Well, I'm not even necessarily talking about science. I'm talking about the people who fund science, and the people who have shaped science are basically authority figures who care about censorship.
That's not true.
Profiteering and all these other things, while they are actually valid criticisms, it's a separate conversation altogether, because I'm not just going to hand wave that away. Set scales. You're right. There's a conversation to be had around that, but we're talking about scientific efficacy right now, not about implementation and what the powers that be and how they're using it all. We're talking about whether or not vaccines work or don't work. And that's really the focus of the show. Corruption in the government, corruption in corporations, absolutely that happens. And anybody who denies that is just simply just ignoring the evidence. But that doesn't mean that these vaccines don't work. It doesn't mean the science behind them isn't solid. I want to make sure that we stay on track with what we're trying to talk about today and what we're trying to promote, because I agree with you. There is a lot of problems with corruption. You and I have had conversations about that before. That's one of the few things that we actually definitely agree on. Chris Moore, you have been very patient. What did you have as another question you wanted to? Oh, speaking of science, here's Dr. Tavo. Great to see you here, brother. Thank you for joining us.
Great to see you too. Thank you.
Yeah, you're always welcome here, Dr. Tavo. So we're going to let Chris Moore go, and then Dr. Tavo. And then probably what we'll do is maybe wind it down to closing remarks, because Dr. Greg has been very patient, giving us a lot of his time today. And I don't want to just make him feel obligated to be here longer than his family wanted to let him go. Be disrespectful to his family and loved ones. And my wife would also like to see me at some point today, to be honest with you. So, Chris, you're going to go, then Dr. Tavo.
Well, the thing about the thing that I wanted to highlight about vaccine, well, the not the vaccine, but the exposure of anything, or even to whatever we put in our bodies, um, in a way, that goes in. Well, for sorry, there's two things that I basically want to say. Is that first, um, what basically skills has statement about an argument dangerously comes into the life unworthy of life diagram that I've proposed, like preposterously go against it on this channel, and it's not a basically skills. I'm sorry, but you're not really good doing yourself any favors if you are actually believing stuff like this.
What did you say you categorized my argument into? The what diagram?
The unworthy of life diagram.
And that's
So,
something you came up with?
well, it might be my wording might be different, but it's the same thing. The ideology of that is the same thing. So, yeah.
All right. Well, I don't know what that is. Sorry.
Dr. Tavo, did you want to step in? And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, with the conversation winding down, I probably don't have a lot to add. Just that a lot of these topics are more nuanced. It's all well and good, and it's probably pretty close to the truth to say that science is always evidence based. The question is, how strong is that evidence? There are several crises in academic and scientific publication right now that are really very sweeping and are very far reaching. In some disciplines to a greater degree than others, and some fields of the sciences are more beleaguered by a lot of issues in regards to, sometimes things are politicized, sometimes the data isn't clear enough, and we state it with more confidence than exists there. So I don't really have a strong opinion one way or another on this, but I do think the perspective that I have is a little more nuanced. I've seen good papers not get as far as they should. I've seen problems with publication. I think a lot of problems with publication are only going to get worse over time. I think the vetting of papers is a real huge problem. Reviewing manuscripts is a really, really massive problem in the sciences. So it's not a perfect, evidentiary basis of things. I think the goal of science is always good. When we have more data, that's always better science that comes out of that. But oftentimes the data is skewed. Oftentimes we're kind of in this moment where there's a crisis of reproducibility, and a lot of these issues kind of like meld together to allow personal opinions about scientific questions to rise higher than they ought to in some situations.
Dr. Tavo, I know you've been involved in the peer review process, and I was curious as what you might think. In fact, I think Dr. Greg as well has been involved in the peer review process, so you might have something to add to this as well. Just this comment, and then after this, I'm gonna give everybody a chance to give us some final remark, uninterrupted, like I always do. I'm gonna have Dr. Tavo, Dr. Greg, having you guys go last, so that you could respond to anything that's been put out there as the actual PhDs in the group. Austin, of course, you'll be part of that group. So, but just really quickly, if I may, Dr. Tavo, do you think that the advent, and I'm not sure historically when this happened, it seems to me to be relatively new, that prior to a certain time period, the peer review process was not paid, right? It was all anonymous. You didn't know who was reviewing your papers, such and such. Now, my understanding is you can actually hire independent companies to peer review your work, which leads me to question whether or not how legitimate this is. Is there motivation, financial motivation, that's now, kind of tainting the process, or am I just like reading too much into that?
In my field, you can't hire a peer reviewer. The peer reviewer works for the journal, and by works for the journal, I mean they don't get paid by anyone, right? That's one of the major crises that we have is nobody's paying for peer reviews. I'm one of the most prolific peer reviewers in the history of the main journal of my field, and it's only because I'm kind of like, you don't get rewarded for peer reviewing. You don't get any points for that. So it carries no weight, right? So I could peer review a 10,000 manuscripts, for the academic promotion process, it wouldn't matter at all. Now, if there are paid reviews for other fields, I would say I would agree with you. That is highly objectionable if that's happening. So it doesn't happen in my field. To my knowledge, there's no way in any medical field that you could publish a paper and just pay for the peer reviews. I will say that we are in a time where paying to publish has become like a bigger thing, and that's causing major problems, right? There's this open access model that's very good, but part of the open access model is you pay to publish, and you can publish absolute crap because of that. So but I don't, to my knowledge, at least not in my field, you can't pay for reviews. It should be totally blinded, and that's the way it ought to stay. If that's happening in another field, I would definitely speak out against that. That'd be horrific.
A lot of what Tavo says is true, especially the part about paying to publish. You can pay a journal with low standards to publish all kinds of junk science. And once it's in the media, once it's reached the information ecosystem, there's really no putting a lid back on it. Like a great example was the study that said that eating chocolate helps you lose weight. That study was wildly cherry picked. It was done with a horrendous methodology. And the way I know is because the person did it on purpose. They did a terrible study on purpose to make an eye catching headline and to see how far this bad science would get pushed. And it got picked up by basically every media outlet out there. And they amplified this claim that even the person publishing knew it was false. He was doing it specifically as a social experiment to see how far a bad junk science paper could get amplified. So it is a real problem.
And it can't help at all that like our president has put somebody like RFK in charge of the health organization, and he's telling people that aspirin gives people autism, and my God, right?
Well, it's kind of interesting too, because that's horrifically unethical, right? If you're saying that this guy published a paper that he knew was false as an experiment,
He didn't know how bad it was going to get. He didn't think that it would go that far, but he eventually came out and admitted, hey, this was my paper. I did this to prove that junk science can get published in bad journals and can get picked up by the media and pushed around. So he did eventually come out and try and correct the misinformation, but I think he underestimated just how much the media would amplify this junk science. So you're right, it is kind of unethical, but I don't think he could have anticipated that would happen.
Yeah.
Dr. Greg, did you want to chime in on the peer review question, or do you want to go to closing comments for everybody?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is like an inside baseball, idea. Thank you, Bear. I think that we could make it better for sure. I think that there are a lot of problems with it. I like the idea of kind of like a more open peer review process, especially when we have, bioarchives and kind of like these preprint servers that are kind of already, adding your stake to that idea, right? And having kind of like an open peer review process where people can add comments and that kind of stuff, which kind of happens because of the preprints. But yeah, I think that there also is kind of a problem with the preprints and the fact that a lot, especially during the pandemic, a lot of papers that even the CDC was citing were preprints during that time. And I think that that's kind of unethical. I think that if you're a governmental body, you should be basing it on, published science, and the idea that a preprint could like sway CDC or something that is a little wary to me. But yeah, I think in general, it's like important, and, scientists are always trying to improve, their process or what's happening. And so I think it's natural in order to try to, engineer a better, publishing protocol that we have. I mean, the PhD itself is hundreds of the process is hundreds and hundreds of years old, and we haven't improved on it yet. You know what I mean? Like, what's PhD 2.0? Nobody knows. But I do have a problem though. Like that's like inside baseball. And I think that it's important for us to have these conversations, but then also it's important to realize that like the peer review process and that stuff is still couple orders of magnitude different than like people debating things on here, like, for example, like things aren't settled through science by like open debate like this. They're settled by more papers and more people doing research in that area. Falsificationism, right? Trying to falsify things in the paper. And I think that like through social media, everyone thinks that they're like an armchair expert. So they see these papers and they see that DOI, or this happens a lot with anti-vax stuff, is that they'll just throw it up on like the Zenodo preprint server, and since it has a DOI number, they'll think it's published research, and that's not true at all. It's just a repository, basically. It's just like having a Google Drive link. It doesn't mean that you're a published author. It just means that it's like up there on the Google Drive, and it makes it a lot easier to talk about misinformation when you think that you have a DOI and a paper to say that you're right. And that's what we see now. We see these incorrect opinions that people were dying from these vaccinations, which just isn't correct. Like McCullough and all these guys lost their license for fabricating data, and they should have. And we should have pulled more licenses away from medical doctors that are doing this. But now, since they couldn't get peer reviewed anywhere, they couldn't actually get their stuff published because it wasn't high quality enough to actually make it into any publication that would go through the peer review process. Now we have things like the McCullough Institute, which RFK made for McCullough so that he could basically create an anti-vaccine conspiracy pamphlet and have it be an official publication now. So that's kind of the problem too, is that like we're having people with credentials, with PhDs and MDs past their name, say these things that are incorrect, that don't have any scientific basis whatsoever. And, through algorithms, we have more people with eyes on them. And so it really it makes it so that it's harder for science communicators to do it, but it also means like to push back against this stuff, right? Because it's so easy for this stuff to spread. But also it means like the importance of doing actual science communications even higher now.
All right, gentlemen, I just really appreciate your participation. We're going to go to closing remarks. This is a chance for each of you to have an uninterrupted time on the stage. No one's going to be, talking over you or past you or whatever, interrupting you, because it's your time. I'm going to start with Set Scales, then we'll go to Austin, then we'll go to Dr. Tavo, and then close that with Dr. Greg, and I'll give just my own closing thoughts. So I do appreciate it if you guys could recognize the guest's time and be respectful of that. Please don't go on a 10-minute tangent or something like that. But you're welcome to say what you feel like you need to say. And remember that I will be getting your links put in the description of the video if I haven't already done it, which apparently I had some oversights when I set this up. My apologies for that, but I will go through this after the video post and make sure you guys are all connected there. So Set Scales, you've got the floor, brother.
Yeah. So everything I said was based in the first principles of natural law, which are basically the spiritual principles which bind all conscious beings together and governs the dynamics of behavior. And its foundation is basically that each individual is responsible for how they interact in the world. And my overall question and point that I was trying to make, and by reading that Manly P. Hall excerpt, is that while we might give ourselves to vaccines over, and they may help us, and I don't doubt that the science says that it heals people, but could there be a better natural alternative that eliminates the disease altogether, that doesn't require us to get sick in the first place? I don't know. Just the thought, if it's possible to think, then I would think that it's possible to achieve somehow. And I would think that if that's the case, then the goal of vaccines should be basically to work themselves out of existence until the diseases are gone and vaccines are no longer needed. But until then, some type of balance between healthy living and medical science should be applied. And with that, I'll say goodnight and agape to all.
Thank you for being here, brother. I absolutely love your hair. It's a great look for you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. I appreciate you're well read when it comes to theology in particular and esoteric stuff. It's always interesting to listen to, even though I disagree with probably 99% of the conclusions. I do think it's a fascinating field of study, and I do think that there can be some benefits to trying to live more intentionally with nature and with the environment that we live in. Smaller population, I'm all for it. I'm all for reducing the carbon footprint of humanity, not eliminating it, but just ethically trying to reduce it a little bit to something that the planet is more manageable with the ecosystem, so that we live within the ecosystem instead of just terraforming everything to where we almost function more like a virus ourselves, in my opinion. All right, brother, thank you for being here today. Austin, you're up next, and I appreciate you stopping by. I know you said you were going to be busy today, but you took time out of your day to be here, and I thank you so much for that, as always.
Yeah, I had to send my daughter to the pony picnic, but it worked. So, so anti-vaxxers, vaccine hysteria peddlers and purveyors, they're great at terrifying people with anecdotes. So let me engage in the dark arts a little bit. My best friend of many years is he's a pediatrician and a pediatric surgeon. And at the height of the pandemic, he had a patient who was living in a high risk environment and probably should have been vaccinated early. But because his parents were super extreme anti-vaxxers, this child had no vaccines. Well, wouldn't you know it, this child contracted meningococcal disease, which is an aggressive bacterial infection that starts necrotizing the limbs shockingly quickly. Now, fortunately, this child survived, but unfortunately, all 4 of the child's limbs had to be amputated. And so this is when anti-vaxxers talk about vaccines, they'll show you pictures of gross looking rashes, and they'll go, oh, look at this kid, he got a rash, vaccines are poison. But they won't tell you about the kids who have no freaking limbs because they didn't get a vaccine. Anti-vaxxers, they think that by not taking a vaccine, they're avoiding a risk. The reality is they're taking a much bigger risk. And so that's the anecdote. And because I hate anecdotes, let me end it off with some statistics for you. This does happen to children. About 10 to 50 per 100,000 children get meningococcal disease, which can be prevented by a vaccine, and they end up losing at least 1 limb to it. Most of them will only lose 1 limb, but some will lose 2 limbs, some will lose 3 limbs, and some subset of them will win that terrible lottery and lose all 4 limbs. And I think about this family all the time. I wonder if in the morning when they're getting their limbless child out of the bed and putting them in a wheelchair that they'll need for the rest of their life, if they hold themselves accountable for the choices that led to their child having no limbs. And I really hope they do, but I'm not so sure about that. And so let me end with this warning. Don't let that be you. Don't let yourself be the person who ends up taking their child's life away because they fell for the spiel. They fell for the fear mongering. So I'll end with that.
Brother, I remember the first time I heard you tell me that story, and I know you went through it kind of quick today out of respect for everyone's time, which I appreciate, by the way. But yeah, when you told me that story for the first time, it's gut wrenching. It's
horrifying.
I don't have the words for it. I literally don't have the words for it, and I'm usually pretty articulate person when it comes to things like that. I have no words to express how stomach churning the reality of this is, and the decisions that people make. And yeah, I appreciate your willingness to share that story. I know it's emotionally difficult and not easy, but I think that you're doing the right thing by, exposing this bullshit for what it actually is. And I thank you once again for stopping by, brother.
My friend still says it was the worst day of his life.
I have no doubt. I have no doubt. Yeah, the thing that anyway, there's some PTSD that comes along inherently when you start talking about being involved in medicine and other fields like that you get exposed to.
Yeah, doctors don't have a good time doing amputations. It's not fun.
Oh, no. All right, Dr. Tavo, you are next. And I just want to say really quickly how much I appreciate you stopping by today. I know that you also are very busy, and it's such an honor to have you here. Thank you so much.
That's really kind. Thank you for the very kind introduction, as always. You don't got to call me Dr. Tavo. Just Tavo is fine, because we're friends, and my YouTube presence is not like, this is one of the few times that the opinion that I'm rendering on YouTube is actually related to my professional interest. And just so everyone knows, I'm not a PhD. I'm an MD. I'm a medical doctor. I'm a university professor, but I'm also a medical doctor. So that's just so that the qualifications, I just don't want to obfuscate any of my qualifications or criteria. And I always try on my own channel, mostly I talk about theological issues, but I always try to parse out that I have no official expertise in theology. I have no credentials theologically whatsoever. Um, it's been an enjoyable conversation from what I heard. I heard of it. I kind of popped in late, but I will say that science is imperfect. I think it's the best tool that we have in our armamentarium, but it's not a perfect set of tools. We should understand the limitations. But what frequently gets missed in all of these conversations is just a widespread underemphasis on science and an underemphasis on intellectual pursuits in general. You can't have a democratic society that works well without an educated populace. You can't have scientific achievement without developing time, resources, and specifically human resources to the pursuit of the sciences. Over the last 5 or 6 years, since 2019 to 2026, there was actually like a 10% drop in how many high school seniors have interest in or want to go into the sciences. So as society changes and as our priorities change and as those priorities shift away from the sciences, science is going to turn into a field that is more inundated with junk. That's an inevitable thing. I find a lot of times I get wrapped up in conversations where people are complaining about, any political process and other stuff. But the point that we often miss in a lot of these conversations is that there is no political opinion that can surmount an uneducated populace. And that's the linchpin. That's the rate limiting step. And it's becoming more and more of a bottleneck. We have to prioritize the sciences. We have to prioritize intellectual growth. We have to start putting our priorities on the right parts of scientific pursuit, like manuscript reviews. That's a hugely important and overlooked aspect of scientific achievement throughout academia. By the way, academia does not reward manuscript reviews, and as a result, that winds up being what people spend the least amount of time on, which is not very surprising. But the bottom line is this: if you want to have good science, you have to have a society that nurtures the sciences, that nourishes and enriches individuals to become scientists themselves. And you have to put time and resources, human effort, and human volition into pursuing the sciences. Without that, without humans prioritizing our intellectual growth and the sciences, everything else is going to be for naught. But it was, from what I heard, a really enriching conversation to just be in the back seat of it. If anyone wants to ask me more about any of these issues, I will be on my channel tomorrow, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and I'm happy to take any and all questions. But it's been nice to be here. It's nice to see somebody like Austin set scales. Nice to see you all again. And I hope my contributions in the last few minutes have been meaningful. And thanks for having me on, OE. Thank you as always for the invitation.
Tavo, I'm gearing up to come over there and give you some feedback on CTF. So I'll be there eventually. I promise.
I'd love that.
Yeah, for those who don't know, Dr. Tavo considers the CTF argument to be what I've heard him say his greatest contribution to Christian apologetics, and it is a pretty significant contribution. I haven't had a chance to go through the whole argument myself, and I said that I would like to do that at some point. And it's probably good that I haven't done it when I initially saw the argument, because my understanding is Dr. Tavo has actually refined a few of the points to make it a little bit stronger, since he's gotten a lot of feedback since he introduced it initially. So by the time I do get to go through the argument, it should be in its strongest form. And Dr. Tavo's gotten a lot of positive feedback from the skeptic community, actually, at the very least for making a significant effort in bringing some actual data points that can be wrestled with, as opposed to just making assertions. And so I do respect that very much. There's not enough of that in religious apologetics. And I think a lot of people have said the same thing, Dr. Tavo. So good for you on that. Or excuse me, Tavo.
Thanks very much.
Absolutely. You're always welcome here. And I'm looking forward to our debate on forgiveness. That's going to be a really fun debate. We should, look at, we need to probably get something on the books just potentially anyway, so I don't overbook myself and then we can't, we have to kick the can down the road. But I think that'll be a really fun debate. I enjoy debating people who are intellectually honest. And I think that you and I are going to have a good back and forth.
Thanks very much.
All right, Dr. Greg, you are up next. And I just want to say thank you so much for coming here today and spending so much time with this community. I know it's difficult. There's a lot of different views that get shared here, and I do welcome the different views on this channel. That's what I'm trying to actually promote, so that we can get to the truth, right? You can't get to the truth if you don't get in and mix it up a little bit with, like Crystal said, we need to have, other people come in and give their opinion so we can figure out where the truth lies. So you've got the stage, brother, and I will be sure to get you linked if I haven't already. I thought I did this when I set this whole thing up, but some people said I may have missed your link in the description, which I don't know how I managed to do that, and I apologize for the oversight, but I will get that in there.
All good. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Yeah, I think it is important to like debate. I think it is important. I actually started my TikTok account. That's how like for the first like 6 months, every day I debated people for 3 to 4 hours a night, and only stopped because people stopped joining to try to debate me. So, and I do think that when we have conversations and stuff like that, it's important because you're not just like talking to that person, you're talking to other people that have, the same question in good faith. Maybe they have, they are questioning why, aluminum is in a vaccine. What is an adjuvant? These words and this jargon that is like thrown around, like what does it actually mean? How does it actually impact people's life? And I just want to show like when, just as an inoculum to pre-debunk you, hopefully, like how do I recognize people that are selling things, right? And how do I know when people are like have an ulterior motive when we're talking about this stuff? And it is very apparent when you look at and you follow the money, right? And you see it with people that are pushing anti-vax conspiracies. They will have a referral link in their bio that is a health coach or a pack that they buy or a vitamin pack or a spike protein, D protein concoction that they are selling to you. So immediately when you see that, that their framework is going to be pushing and selling those kits that they have, that they're trying to make money off of you. They're trying to instill fear in you to make money off of you. And we see it like McCullough, for example, Peter McCullough, the disgraced medical doctor who lost his license, he sells his health clinic online, sells ivermectin. And guess what? So every time that he's on TV talking about this, he's talking about, detoxing your body and taking these vitamin supplements to detox it and all these type of things. When hantavirus came out, guess what? The number one things that they told you to take? Ivermectin. Like, is that like a guy who sells bricks is telling you that bricks are going to help you build whatever you need? Is bricks always going to be the best thing? No, but a brick salesman is going to be selling you bricks. So just think about that when you see these people and you see, these algorithms shooting you information. You can look and see who's running this. Why are they doing this? What are they going? And RFK sits there and tells you these pharmaceutical companies are so big. Why do they have to be? Why can't we sue them? In order to if they're so good, right? Well, guess what? RFK makes money off of suing pharmaceutical companies that are making vaccines. They do. So they make millions of dollars. He had to disclose that in his HHS financial the documents. So you actually Elizabeth Warren asked him about this because he's getting millions of dollars in a payout from Merck, who he as HHS secretary is going to be regulating Merck. Direct conflict of interest, right? But they make money off of it. They people lie to you on the internet. People lie to you on the internet, and like science is not perfect, but that doesn't mean that everything from science is bad or the scientists are working in some global cabal, working in secret in order to keep people sick, right? That just doesn't exist. But what you don't see is any of these health or HHS recommendations that RFK is pushing. He's not linking any science, guys. None of the studies. He's not putting a study that exists that in order to make the shots 3 times more often. You have to take 3 times as many shots now if you're a 1-year-old, and you have to be signed on to pediatrician appointments 3 times. Like, why would they be doing that, right? Why would they be doing that? Wouldn't think about it, if physicians actually made money per shot, wouldn't they want more money Wouldn't they want more pediatrician appointments? Wouldn't pediatricians, if they were actually looking it out for the money, wouldn't they love that? Like, no pediatrician supports that. No pediatricians want less doctor visits. They want less shots in people's arms, because that's going to be more likely that people are vaccinated. So that means that the higher quality of life, because they're less diseased. Sometimes Occam razor just is the right thing. And I feel like, people get pushed these things and they see things on their algorithms and they see it for so many times that they just think that it's true. Like lab leak is another one. You probably have heard this, and you probably think because you've heard it so often that there probably is something nefarious going on, but there isn't. There's not a single shred of scientific evidence to show that SARS-CoV-2 came from a lab, as opposed to a natural zoonotic spillover that we've seen on every other virus that has ever existed. But this one's different, guys. But this one's different. Trust me, bro. So just think about that. Just think about who is selling you this lie, and why are they selling it to you. So thank you.
Appreciate you all being here today. And just once again, I'll make sure everybody's links get put into the description of the video. So I just want to do very short closing remarks for myself. I don't have a whole lot that I can offer, because this is not my field of expertise, which is why I rely on experts. And that's actually what I think that's a virtue, to trust people who know more than you do. That doesn't mean that you say that, well, they can never be wrong. It doesn't mean that you don't look into as much information as possible, but it means we need to have some intellectual humility, right? And realize that when we're starting to cite, there were 2 citations today that were mentioned, people who are mystics promoting scientific hypotheses to the world, right? Mystics, they have absolutely no scientific credibility whatsoever. And they're telling the world, oh, you shouldn't do this. You shouldn't get into vaccines. This is terrible. This is so unethical to be, infecting people with these diseases through a vaccine, because they have a complete misunderstanding of what it is. And they're promoting religiosity and spirituality, which they have no evidence for whatsoever. So they're in absence of evidence and active denial of evidence. They're promoting these ideas we have evidence that are actively harming people. That's the kind of misinformation that I just can't tolerate, to be honest with you. So when Crystal asked if I was going to be having the other side in a conversation like this, so I actually am well known for opening up my platform to bring different ideas. I do it with these open panels. I'm more than willing to let people come on to an open panel and introduce their idea with a guest. I've also actually allowed guests to come here and platform their own ideas that I disagree with when it comes to religion, things of that nature, right? Philosophy, things of that nature. And I've told them directly, I says, hey, listen, I've done it very respectfully. I don't actually agree with what you're saying, but I'm going to give you a chance to at least put your ideas out there and let people come and join the panel and push back on your ideas. But what I'm not going to do with my platform, give people a chance to promote flat earth or anti-vax conspiracies or anti-trans rhetoric or anti-gay marriage rhetoric or anti-abortion rhetoric. That kind of stuff I'm actually not going to actively platform. Now, I will let people come onto the open panel portion and open up these ideas if they can do it respectfully. But I'm not gonna have a featured guest come in and spout that kind of stuff, because I find it to be actively harming people. I'm not an anti-theist yet. So I am still holding on to hope that religion actually has a net positive, although I think it's a very slim margin at this point. But I do know so many people do benefit from their religious beliefs, and I don't want to take that away from them, at least not at this point. But when it comes to anti-science, I know I'm not gonna platform that actively when it comes to things like that. So that's just my response to that. I would like to thank everybody for being here, being in the chat, for being respectful, for coming up and being part of the panel. The show is what it is because of you guys. It's really your show, not my show per se. I do have a certain responsibility, though, to the content that comes out. But for all the good that happens, it's really because of everything that you all bring to the table and bring to the discussion. And I'd like to thank all of you for being a part of it. I'm going to go ahead and sign off with that and say thank you for being here today.
Objective ethics is my game. I have a a big YouTube channel. 3.30 through repeating, of course. That's better than I've done before. Deacon Brennan, Willard, what do you do? Wait, objective ethics will be on your plate.
Love it. Okay. Thanks, man. Appreciate you. That was great. All right. All right, guys. That was awesome. Welcome in. Welcome in, guys. Oh, yeah, my Discord. Yeah. Sorry, I'm really bad at self-promotion, guys. I'm sorry. I'll learn it one day. Boom. The world famous. Oh, I can't. Oh, it didn't work. Sorry, guys. I didn't have that set up. Yeah, there's my Discord link.
The world famous Dr. Greg Show.
God. Dr. Greg. Yes, daddy.
I don't know why did it take so long. Thank you, guys. Thank you for the gifts and stuff. Oh my god. Yeah, that theme song was great. Oh, sorry, Titan. Sorry. 6'7". 6'7". That's beautiful. Here you go. Here, Titan. Let me show you. Yeah. So yeah, guys, that was fun. I appreciate you. That was very cool. Yeah, that was fun. I think the whole kind of like, yeah, it's cool to go out. I love the I love talking to new guests, new groups, about science communication. I think that's a really cool. I need it. Can I have your mom gift? Can I do that? I guess so. I could have like something like that. That'd be cool. That'd be a cool idea. Your mom joke. That'd be good. I like that. But yeah, guys, I got a pretty big debate coming up on Wednesday. I'm actually going out to Vegas in order to do that. So that should be cool. I don't know. I signed an NDA, so I don't know if I can say. I'm going on something big. So something big's happening. So that's cool. And so that's happening. And yeah, I'm excited. And yeah. But should be fun. Should be fun. I appreciate you guys hanging out. I think, yeah, I'm going to be putting out a lot more information on SAFE, doing a lot more advertisement for that. So science and freedom for everyone. I need to plug that every time that I'm anywhere. Scienceandfreedom.com. No, I did not get it. I have not gotten a new job. No. Nope. I'm just going to Vegas for this because it's a pretty cool opportunity. So that's why I'm going. But I'm just driving out for the day. I'm just like driving out there in the morning and then doing the thing and then driving back immediately. So it's not like I'm not staying at all. So yeah, just doing the thing. So anyway, I'm going to take off, do some family stuff. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you soon. So thanks for being here. I appreciate you. I might stream later tonight. I don't know. Maybe we'll see. And then, yeah, it was good. Yeah, I've been streaming for like 4 hours now, so I kind of want to just take a break and then have like a little family sesh, hang out with the fam, and then maybe stream later tonight. So I think that would be probably the best way to go about it. So the time, nothing else. I don't know. Yeah, I think it's Wednesday. It's Wednesday at noon. Let's see. I'll post it. Community announcements. Wednesday the 19th. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. I love you guys. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you. Thank you for the gifts. Thank you, for, Caitlin Gatu. Sorry, I don't know. Thank you guys. Love you guys. I'll talk to you later. Okay. Bye.